Welcome back to another special edition of the Habs Weekly Recap with hockey coach Gold Frenchies directly for the beautiful country of Thailand on the amazing great Monday night, March 25th, 2024. And we have a special guest tonight directly for the country land of the Nashville, Michael Devellano, and from Hawkesbury, Mr. Marco Larabi, and from Toronto, Mr. Inartap. All of you, welcome back in the house.
Feels a little crowded in here, Coach, but I'm very excited to have Michael with us. I feel a little bit underdressed, but very, very excited to have Michael with us tonight.
I say put the air conditioning on.
Wow.
Wow. It's like party on the outside, party on the inside.
Yeah. Very excited.
That's awesome.
Okay,
Welcome,
Michael,
Michael. Hopefully,
where are
doing
you
well. We saw you a couple of weeks ago, but thanks to be with us. For the people new on the chat, now the people, or we have new people, you don't know Michael. Michael started the Hockey Nation with me August 25th, 2020. Show was only the morning, 11 o'clock. Only me, his dog, and Michael together to do the show for a couple of days. But after that, we become from that day number one all day tonight. We are over 7,000 people. So we're growing slowly, populate the right way. The most important thing, we have the quality of the people as a co-host and the quality of the people in the chat. That's the most important things because we're doing this with respect, with some knowledge about hockey, your favorite team, the Blue Barrows, the Montreal Canadiens. So that's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to talk about the Montreal Canadiens, the review of the week, a couple of things what's going on around the Montreal Canadiens. And of course, Marcus is going to bring some information about what's going on in NHL and also the WHL. And finally, of course, of the NHL Draft 2024. We know Michael is a scout for the WHL, the Everett Silver Tips. And I believe, Michael, they all select number one this year for the NHL draft, not NHL draft, but the WHL draft, right?
Okay. So we made a trade, as you probably know, last year in January. It was the main figure was Olin Zellweger, who's now in the Anaheim Ducks organization, to Kamloops. Kamloops was hosting the Memorial Cup. We got a lot. We got 4 players. I think 3 of them are on our roster. Maybe all 4. I have to double check. We also got their first pick this year, plus a bunch of other first picks, but they finished last. So we're in the draft lottery. I don't think we can finish worse than second. So we're either the first or second pick, and the draft, the lottery is on Wednesday.
Oh, it's on Wednesday. Wow.
Good luck with that.
Is it remote, Michael, the lottery? Like, how does it work compared to the NHL? Yeah?
Yeah. The lottery is remote.
Here we go. We wish you the good luck about this. We're going to start right away, guys. We're going to have a great content to talk about tonight. It's about the Montreal Canadiens. And, of course, the big news of the day, guys, it's about this one. Martin Saint-Louis is back with the Montreal Canadiens. He's going to be behind the bench Tuesday night against the Colorado Avalanche. He was a little bit open up with great information about what happening, everything on that. So his son, 16 years old, Mason, got an injury during a game when he played for the Connecticut Rangers AAA program. And obviously, he did not do very well at the beginning, so he had to leave the Montreal Canadiens for a couple of weeks or maybe a couple of days. And then he's going to be ready back behind the bench. And the good news behind that, his son's going to recover at 100%. And this is the great news behind this situation for Martin St. Louis. So let's go from Marco all the way to Inartap and the rest to see what you think the impact on Martin St. Louis with behind the bench for the Montreal Canadiens.
Well, Coach, I think it was kind of a delightful surprise, right, to see St. Louis. Nobody was really sure how long it was going to be, right? So Montreal did a really good job managing the situation. And like we talked about when the news came down, I think it was overall a pretty good reaction from the fan base. Michael, we were talking about maybe like 25 years ago, if something like this happened, all the Montreal papers would have sent like 10 investigative reporters to where he was to find out all the details and smut reporting. But overall, like even the Montreal media, who's renowned to be so hardcore, they did a pretty good job, like respecting his privacy and everything. So kudos to the fan base and the and the management team for allowing St. Louis to kind of be with his family. We all agree that's the most important thing. Coach, I can't describe how important it is to have him back, right? Like probably a lot of fans don't really care that much. They're especially our tank friends, like people that are more just interested in Montreal losing every game. But in my view, guys, every minute that St. Louis can spend with the young players is worth it, right? So to have him back, to get to have their leader back, because say what you want, like, yes, Suzuki's the captain, Savard is a great leader and everything else, but the true leader of the team is Martin St. Louis, right? So great to have him back. He'll be able to continue his work with all the young players and maybe make the most of the end of the season here, guys. Like continue the progress and continue the development of how they're playing. So really, really good news.
Well said. By the way, and after before you start, everything happening because Patrick was annoying everyone last night about Martin St. Louis and that chat there, and because Letoski behind that, it was boring to see the Randy Connor work. So Martin St. Louis said, Patrick, you did not know, but I'm coming back right away. So now you'll be fine. So who is going to be the next one? Is going to complaining Patrick Lawhite tonight?
They'll find something. They'll find something to come.
Look, like the most important thing, obviously, is that his son is doing well. I think it's always difficult when these things happen in anybody's life that you obviously attend to your family first and everything else is secondary. And the fact that everything seems to be on the up and up and he's back can only be an emotional lift for the team. And I think it's also good for Martin to be back with the team and sort of resume his daily life again now that he has a little bit of peace of mind. So we wish him and the Habs the best, and obviously his son as well. And you're right, Marco, it's an important time of the year. We've always said this time of these last 20, 25 games, you're evaluating all year long, but I think these last 20, 25 games of the year are critical for the coaching staff to really get an idea of what they have moving forward. And this is a great opportunity to see that firsthand rather than on tape.
Awesome to hear that, Michael. From the outside of that, how do you see Martin St. Louis around, as a head coach for the Montreal Canadiens?
I think it was weird for him coming in without experience, but he's had early returns of developing young players. I think you could see the development of Cole Caulfield. People are kind of concerned about his goals, but he's still a very good player. Slavkovsky, I don't think any of us saw being the player that he is already. There was definitely concerns about, what's his hockey IQ, his ability to play like a skill game, and he's racking up points. And I would say he's ahead of where I would have anticipated. And you can give credit to the Montreal staff in general, but you got to think that, watching St. Louis on the ice, he's teaching them how to play the game. And I think that this is an imperfect lineup, right? Like there's no superstar. Like Nick Suzuki's done real well, but he's not he's not in the elite class of players. And they've been pretty competitive every night. They've managed a difficult goalie rotation. Like you've got to give him a lot of credit. He's very passionate.
Yep, absolutely about that. So glad to have Martin St. Louis. And beyond all what you said, Marco and Arthur and Michel, Marco, is I really like the fact that the media was really private about that situation. Not many, they tried to figure out or to put a lot of, to try to get a clickbait or whatever it is. The reporter was really private about that. Of course, they tried to figure out everything, but I think overall it was pretty good, the media, to cover the situation of Martin St. Louis. So great news to know that. And then welcome back, Martin St. Louis. And as hockey fans, it'll be good to see him with the Montreal Canadiens. So that's happening about this guy. We're going to see, first of all, we have a lot of people that shall be forever to welcome everybody. But we want to say thanks to join us tonight. If you have any question tonight about anything about the NHL Draft, or any specific team, put the little Q. I'm going to answer to your question all the way during the show. So don't hesitate. Take advantage of the people in the chat with me tonight. So if you want to have some answer for your question, that'd be great. And then we want to thanks everybody to be with us tonight. A lot of few people, new people in the chat. So thanks to be with us. And then we have everybody else in the chat. But first of all, we're going to talk about this one. The record of Montreal Canadiens the last week is 1-1-1. Lost in the shootout against the Edmonton Oilers. Not shootout and overtime, I believe. And then you have the W against Seattle Kraken Sunday, and the last again the Vancouver Canucks Thursday, record of 1-1-1. So overview everything in our tap, a specific thing or whatever you want to talk about. Then Marco going to jump on that, and then I'm going to move on.
Yeah, for me, I mean, first of all, that 1-1-1 that I keep going with every week seems to be the lucky selection. But yeah, you know what? It would have been easy to sort of throw in the towel, especially with St. Louis out of the coaching duties and playing on the road against three very tough opponents. But I thought they really rose to the occasion in each one of the games. The Edmonton game was a great exhibition on sort of how to stop some of the better players in the league, and I thought guys like Gouli especially really rose to the occasion. He's probably one of the players that in these three games stood out for me. And yesterday, jumping out to that early lead, 4 goals right away, pulled the goaltender there as well, caused that. I thought that's something rare and something that they needed to do with more frequency during the course of the year. But when you don't have the depth to your lineup, it's hard to do, right? And as we've seen, I think, Coach, you mentioned it yesterday during the game. The first period has actually been Montreal's biggest Achilles heel. They fall behind, and then they're always playing a chase game, trying to get it caught up and taking chances sometimes, and that's why we see a huge number with the plus minus difference. Because it doesn't make sense the fact that I think if we're not the leaders, we're in second place in terms of 1-goal games, which shows great growth in the team, but our record is what it is. So I think that helps explain why that's the case. But I thought they played 3 very good games. They pushed back whenever they had to, and I thought the defense was a little bit more solid and working better as a unit.
And
yeah, so tough road trip, right, guys? Like the Pacific, leg of a West Coast road trip. Pretty tough team. So you're, Edmonton, Vancouver, and then Seattle. Lost 7 games in a row here, but I felt the the Edmonton game was kind of a duplication of what we saw in Boston. I think what impressed us about that Boston game was how patient Montreal played in that game. Saying we had been preaching a lot around, not feeding the other team's offense so much, and just being able to play patient and wait for the openings and stick to the structure and everything, right? So those are 2 really good defensive teams. Like, I know it sounds weird to say Edmonton as a good defensive team, but if you look at their shot suppression and you look at their kind of goals against over the last 30 games, very solid defensive team, and we know all about Boston, right? So Montreal kind of in really, really tight checking games in both those games. And again, I was really impressed with how they were able to kind of stick with the plan and just play a really patient game. Vancouver, was a bit of a different game. I felt that they got knocked around a little bit. Entertap, you're talking about Gouli. I'm not sure if they had his name circled on the board, but man, did they ever go after Caden Gouli in that game. It was an interesting test. It was an interesting test, right, to see how he would stand up to that. Overall, I think he did okay, but they did certainly put an onslaught on him. So I felt Montreal didn't react as well as you would like, maybe, to that style of play. Typically Montreal doesn't play super well against really heavy teams that like Florida and Minnesota, teams that really kind of wear you down in the with their ozone, right? So overall, like I think the coaches have to be happy with how the guys did, and some tough breaks, like they lost Joshua Roy, right? So really, they were already testing their depth quite a bit, but then you have Joshua Roy who's just starting to emerge, and now you're having to elevate Gallagher and RHP on that third line that was going, or that second line, I guess, with Newhook that was going pretty good. So overall, I think fans and the coaches probably happy with that result, and really just that Vancouver game, the Seattle game. Guys, like I wouldn't get too excited about it. Like we all saw how Grubauer played, in that first period. Interesting watching Seattle. Really, really struggling as well too. I like so yeah, like it's a good result, but overall Seattle, if you look at that at the underlying numbers for that game, like Seattle took it pretty good to Montreal that game, and Primo once again, like really solid effort from him, which is really nice. Montreal getting a little bit more of a sample from Primo, which is kind of what you want coming out of that 3 goalie rotation. So pretty impressive from Primo. You could say that what I was looking for in that game, guys, with Primo too. You could say that the goal that they did score, he kind of went down early, probably a goal that he would want back. And in the past, some fans, I think you go back to that time where he had that really tough game against Toronto, and he was like crying in the dressing room. And so I think some fans, I don't know if you remember that, Michael, but yeah, like when he was coming up, he had a really rough game. He got pelted, and
I remember he he was crying.
Yeah, he was crying. So a lot of the fan base have always kind of questioned maybe his mental fortitude a little bit since that.
That's wild.
But that's what I think. It's a test to him, right? That Michael, you can probably add on, fishtail on this one, but being in a 3 goalie rotation all year, really not getting your reps, but still staying concentrated and having some quality starts. And what we're seeing in game, Michael, with Primo is that even if he does allow a bad goal, he's showing the ability to actually rebound within the game itself, right? Like being able to reset. As you know, like for a goalie, the best thing is to have just a short memory, right? Short-term memory is critical. So overall, good stretch here, guys. For the Habs with the severely undermanned lineup, like we have all year. But Michael, I don't know if you've watched any of these games, but any thoughts on what you've heard about, or?
Well, I guess I keep hearing the negativity, first of all, around the 3 goalie rotation. I don't think you had one guy that really was capable of being a true number 1 at this point. And I'm not sure if any of these guys are long-term. You've traded Jake Allen. He seems to be the Jake Allen that you've always known. Some games he's excellent, and then he goes, and kind of lets you in the game, the other team in the game. So, you're seeing the exact same thing. Like 1 minute is the hero in New Jersey, and the next minute he's the GOAT. That's not the greatest of all time. As far as Primo, I think there was a real question mark in my head if this guy would ever play in the NHL. And he's a big goalie, and goalies take time, obviously. So I think it's probably good that you guys had the 3 goalie rotation personally. And I just keep reading about the negativity about it. I think it's almost less pressure because there's like analytics for a lot of things, and there's some sort of analytics that say a goalie has to play, I think it's like 67 games or something in the NHL before he's ready. The problem is nobody wants to eat the 67 games that it takes to get there. So I think it's an effective way to manage their load over time. And so I think that's been really smart. They've done a really good job as far as I'm concerned. And then I think the team is pieces, right? It's an imperfect. You've got some guys that are going to be on their way out, and then you got young guys you're just trying to bridge to maybe getting more talent.
Yeah.
Sure. Great point. I was said for that week for the Montreal Canadiens, but before we move, I said something about this. I want to mention we talk about a rotation 3, but one person we never talk behind those 3 goaltender is the goalie coach for the Montreal Canadiens, Eric Raymond. That's an amazing, great job with them. And I think Michael hit the nail when he said also it's good for Primo to stay in NHL, to be around and to be around the team, and then they face the shot every day, and then to be with Eric Raymond, having more time to make video with him, everything like that. I think Eric Raymond does a great job with the Montreal Canadiens. Because it's not easy, guys, to run a three goaltender. I don't know if you've been coached or you've been around the team, but it's affect everything, and to keep them motivated every day, to be enthusiastic, to be positive, and it's not easy. And at the flip side, we have to give credit for the players to be, great teammates around Jake Allen, Primo, and then Montembeau. Back for the 3 game for Montreal Canadiens, I'm going to talk that way with that. First of all, let us keep first win as a coach, assistant coach, interim in NHL. Congratulations about him. And then secondly, we said to you, I like the fact like Montreal took a lead 4 goal in the first period. This is the first time since March 2023 against the Pittsburgh Penguins. They keep the lead. Usually they fall asleep and then they let a chance for the other team to come back. I think I like that. At that team, at that game, I think one player nobody talk about is Joel Armia for the week. Consistency 3 games. But yesterday, guys, he did a lot of stuff. The details of the game we talk about to recover the puck, protect the puck. A great pass to New Hook when he hit the crossbar for the hat trick at the third period. This was all about Joel Armia. So for me, it's the plus stood out as a 4-star of the week. I don't want to go deeper. We already been about this. The 3 game for the Montreal from Enartem and Marco. But we have a question for you, Marco, from Steve G. Caden Amel play for the Silver Tips. Did he get called up for the Seattle Kraken?
No, he's still playing in Everett. We finished our regular season. I think we're ranked like 7th in the Canadian Hockey League, and our top 4D are pretty strong, and Caden's amongst that group. I don't think we have like an Olin Zellweger, although Terrence Smith has had a really terrific year. And then we have a veteran we acquired, which is Parker Berge. And then really, I would say it's Caden with Eric Jameson. So that top 4 has been really, really solid. And he's been a big part of our success this year. I think we've had, how do I be polite? Our goaltending was a work in progress this year. We've been very blessed in the past with like elite goaltending. You see what Dustin Wolf is doing in the NHL despite the detractors. He's in the NHL, and where's Spencer Knight? And that was the comparison there. And Spencer was always ahead of him, and I never really understood it because performance-wise, that's Dustin. Well, I don't think we have that the last 2 years. We've had a lot of success in spite of that, and I think it's been really due to the play of Caden and the other D on the team. I mean, the overall team for sure, but that D core has been really, really good.
Awesome. I'm going to ask the question only one by one. So in our tap, does a 3 goalie system mess with how the player play?
Well, I'm going to put it from this perspective. I think all 3 goalies in Montreal were very professional about the occurrences and the fact that they were in that predicament. I don't think it was something necessarily that was planned out by the management. It happened because they couldn't get rid of Allen, and teams, elected to wait for the most part until the trade deadline time. And also, I think that Hughes had intentions that his mind wasn't going to sway away from in terms of what he was going to get for Allen, and teams were not willing to pay that, because I know there were a couple of teams that put in offers, but they were sort of ridiculous. I think one of them was the Leafs offering a 7th round pick for him, which was crazy at the time. But I think what they got for him was solid, and it could turn out to be a 2nd round pick if he ends up playing 40 games for the Devils next year. And, by all indications, he might very well get to that. We'll see. But to answer the question, I personally, I'm not a big fan of the 3 goalie system. I know maybe we're moving towards that direction in the future. I just find that goalies are creatures of habit, and they're used to a specific routine and getting the certain number of reps that they get, and knowing that they're going to be playing whatever every third night if they're the backup or whatever the case might be. So it's a little bit difficult on their psyche that way. But I compliment all three for hanging in there and being very professional, never complaining, and taking it.
Hey, Coach, can I just piggyback on that question for a sec? I'm curious from Michael on something, because Michael, we've had this conversation. I think you probably last summer when you were on here, we talked about it with you as well. I'm just curious kind of how your thinking has evolved on this, but with kind of where the overall where the position of goaltending is heading in the NHL, like we're just seeing kind of a change, like less elite goaltending, more tandem situations, and you see how many kind of teams are struggling just to even have like 2 deep in their lineup, right? And really you need like 3 deep to if you're going to be competitive moving forward. We're just not seeing we debated, is that kind of the output of like Canadian goaltending not producing the same quality in the past. Like we won't get into the root causes, right? But with this new reality of goaltending becoming even more voodoo than we're used to, do you think it would be a good idea for the NHL to kind of open up an extra roster spot on NHL rosters to allow teams to actually carry 3 goalies and not have to kind of waive them? Something that we've discussed here.
I mean, I think that's smart. I think Carolina, for example, was very, pioneering in a lot of areas, right? Where they brought in a guy that ran a hedge fund as the new owner, moved on from Ron Francis, and they took almost, I won't say a money ball, but most like they looked at analytics in a lot of areas that normally you wouldn't look at. And, they were pushing a 3 goalie rotation based upon, guys that had an imperfect physical issue, right? Like Frederick Anderson, Antti Ranta, great when they're in, but they're not getting what you would traditionally expect as like a 50, 60 game rotation. It's very hard. And I think the offense has improved so much, and, the lack of physical play and the way the rules are, that the wear and tear on the goalies is really hard. And it's really tough to expect one goalie night in, night out, week in, week out to be really that number one guy. So I think what the math shows, and I think what Carolina kind of, it's a copycat league, right? Carolina showed that you're better to either split it up between 3 guys and, max you're maybe going to get 40 games out of your top guy. So you see even in the New York Rangers, like number one, it's been really helpful for Jonathan Quick. So Jonathan Quick gets in 24 games and his performance looks amazing in reduced minutes. Suddenly he's an excellent goalie again in people's eyes, but he's not playing 50, 60 games. On the flip side, Shesterkin is rested a lot more. You can see maybe he's zoned out and people get on top of him, but really 47 games, he's got very good numbers. And I think you look at Detroit, like Detroit has 3 goalies coming in. So I just think and you can just go down roster after roster. Like look what happened in Vegas and they win a cup. Yeah. Tampa's maybe the exception with Vasilevsky, where that's the best goalie in the world for a reason. And who's like him?
There's like maybe 4 teams, a guy like that, right? Like maybe 4 teams that have a guy that's going to play like over 6. Maybe,
right? And you look at what it's done to him. Like, it's definitely he's faced a lot of punishment in his body, especially with the deep playoff runs. So, I think people realize that this is a wear and tear thing, and that there's a high skill level. They're picking goalies based upon size and very specific skill sets, and there's a lot of math around it. And the teams that don't approach it like that are getting destroyed. Like what's going on in Seattle? Like they have, it's like that's chaos. Whereas I think the other teams are explaining what the math is, and the goalies are buying in. It's not the old days of if you play till you win. That's not what they're talking about.
Yeah, I just think though, Michael, it's better from the perspective that if you do have an elite goalie, they're getting that opportunity to rest come the playoff time. Because if you look at that have had great seasons and then not produced in the playoffs, and one name that comes to mind is Hellebuck. Like you can't keep running him out there 65 plus games and expect him not to be worn out.
Even
but
same.
Is that do you guys think that that's more a product of 3 goalie system, or the fact that the backup is being more relied upon?
I like I said, I think Michael nailed it. It's the wear and tear, right? Look at Vasilevsky, look at Price. We know this intimately, right, with our experience. But with the new techniques that goalies are using, like the reverse VH, like those are really high stressors on hip,
High stress.
right? Huge stressor, right? So I think overall, they need to kind of rethink the whole. Like, I'm not saying we'll get to the stage where it's like baseball, right, where we carry different goalies for
A lot
different
of
game
that.
situations. Yeah, but maybe somewhere in between, right? Like where you have you look at the goaltender position a bit differently, and it's just I think an important way to kind of rethink the game and give teams a little bit more flexibility when it comes to that roster, so that they don't have to kind of do gymnastics all the time to keep that third goalie if it's going to be a huge part of what the NHL is going to be like moving forward. Because the days of having like a 60 game starter, guys, I think it might happen once in a while, but it's going to be rare.
I mean, look at Toronto. Like, Toronto's got an excellent record, 3 imperfect goalies.
Yeah,
Yeah. But you're getting them in sample sizes enough that you're like, how do these guys have as many wins as they do? And it's more about controlling what shots they face. If they can't handle those shots, then that's a task for the goalie coach. And you can survive having Ilya Samsonov play 30 games because you're getting 20 from the other guys.
Yeah, and to his
Awesome.
question,
Go
ahead, Coach.
Something else?
I was just going to say, like, the 3 goalie system, like for Primo in particular, it just gave him a lot more time to practice, right, with the goalie, right? So when you have that 3 goalie system, yes, if you plan to run it exactly like you would a 2 goalie system, then it's not going to work well. But you just need to adapt how you're training and how you're managing the situation. So smart teams can make it work, and like everybody's saying here, I think Montreal did a good job managing that this season.
Yeah, that's a new way, I believe, that's going to happening about that. And I think, like Bob answered to my answer to me about, because I said one is the schedule make them a little bit more fatigued with the back-to-back travel around. Like you said, he's been there for many years, but I said the quality of the goalie is different now. We don't have the same kind of goalies around the league, and we don't have a lot of Patrick Roy, Martin Brodeur. And now the team really pay attention, because the career of the goalie, I believe, is going to be shorter if you play too many games, because the hip injuries, something like that. Gary Price is one of them. But I think the fact they protect more the goaltender, they're helping the longevity of the career in NHL. Secondly, because Montreal, they don't have a goaltender number 1. That's another problem. And the fact that they're helping, for me, Primo, Montembeault, and Allen. 3 goaltender never been, Jake Allen did before, but at this age, to carry on 45 to 55 game, that would get better chance to have a better performance overall when they are a little bit more rest between 2 starts. So that's happening about this. We are going to be back with a couple of questions in the next couple of minutes. And before that, I want to talk about, here we go, the Montreal Canadiens prospect during the weekend and the last couple of days. And then we're going to do different players. And then I would like to hear from you guys what you think about them. First of all, it was the first weekend for David Rebacker. Played 3 games with 1 goal, 1 assist, 2 points. For me, it's a successful. He heard a lot of great praise words from the head coach, Jean-Francois Hull, joining an interview to join the day. And I would like to hear from in our tap about the performance of David Rebacker. And then I have a couple other players for each one of you, Michael, and also Marco and Michael. So let's start with in our tap about Rebacker.
Well, it's definitely considered a successful weekend for him, I think, in the 3 games that he played. And first of all, with all the travel that he had to do, it wasn't easy to just fit into a whole different system with new players and react the way he did. It was nice to see this goal right here. I thought it was he had a very good option to pass, but he shows that he's got confidence in his shot as well. I think the biggest adjustment has had to be with his getting accustomed and adapted to the North American hockey size rink. And if any sort of negativity came out of the weekend, and it's very minor, was exactly that. That there were a couple moments when he kind of caught out of position, but he adapted very well, and I think that that's something that comes with time and practice. And I like what I saw in those 3 games. I watched all three, and great thing for Laval to win all three. And they were critical for their playoff run, and they were against Belleville and Toronto, 2 teams that they were chasing. So good on them.
Great point about that. For sure, we're going to go back to the next one we'll talk about for Marco. And it's going to be, let me pick up here. I'm back on that. Is going to be the goaltender, Jacob Fowler. We talked during the weekend, me and Marco, about Fowler versus Hudson. But the winner of the weekend, honestly, was Fowler. Stopped a 62 to 65 shot he faced during the weekend. Gave only 3 goals, 2 big W, and the Boston College are the winner of the Hockey East Division NCAA. So give us a bit more information about Fowler, if you don't mind, Marco.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to remember the name of the guy, but this summer during the draft, like they had the video of the I think it's the assistant head scout for Montreal that was really fighting for Montreal to draft Fowler. Coach, this guy has won at every level that he's been at, right? And this weekend, really 2 strong performances, especially against BU. Like the score doesn't really dictate how close that game was at certain times. You're seeing probably some of the best saves that he had there. But I have limited viewing of this guy. Like I've maybe seen 5 of his games this year. But every time I see him, coach, like to me, the thing that sticks out the most is he's like a general out there, right? Like just really commanding, So I think Montreal fans are familiar with goalies that can be a little intimidating to the opponent. We were lucky enough to have a goaltender that was one of the most intimidating goalies in there. And again, guys, I'm not comparing Fowler to Carey Price. He has a long way to go there. But in terms of how he conducts himself, like how much of a presence he is on the ice and how intimidating he can be and how intense he is as well, too, right? Like, I think he's a little less calm than Price, but like he's a little more intense and fiery in how he plays. But overall, like his fundamentals look really strong. Like we've talked about this, like scouting goalies is like voodoo, right? Like we're not experts. It's hard to really quantify. Like I'm not an expert technically or anything, but from what I see, anyways, coach, like he's like a general out there. He's very commanding. And a really big part of the season that Boston College had this season, right? So yeah, very athletic, big guy, over 6'3", very competitive too, right? And a little bit of swag, right? Like a little bit of positive arrogance to him as well, which is pretty critical if you're going to have success at this level. There's kind of some legendary questions about his interview at the combines and everything with Montreal. So Michael, I don't know if you have a lot of intel on Jacob Fowler, if you have any intel on him at all. Like I know he's more an NCAA guy, but any thoughts on Mr. Fowler?
I mean, you kind of said it. Like he's been a winner at every level. He's definitely got a take charge type of personality. He's big in the net. Like he has got to be well over 200 pounds. Like he is not just a tall goalie. He's a pretty thick goalie. Like a lot of these guys we see are like 6'2", 6'4", and they're like 175, 195. I think he might be 210. So I don't know how that's going to play out. That he doesn't look like he's in the greatest of shape, but he moves very explosively, and he covers a lot of net. So it'd be interesting. I think he's doing well at the level he's at. He's got really good fundamentals. He's got the pieces you would want. Now he's really going to have to take it to another level, and I think it's going to be don't expect this guy in the NHL anytime soon. Like I think this is like a 2 to 4 year project after this. I'm assuming that he'll be in the NHL next year, but he's in 04.
He's still going to be in the NCAA next year. No, he'll do another. Oh yeah, like he'll probably do another season at Boston College, I would imagine. I think you're right.
think it's smart to get him in the AHL because he's an 04.
So.
Yeah.
I'm
pretty confident
that makes sense.
they might have him has spent another year there. I think you nailed it. Like in terms of conditioning, that's probably what they want to work with him on the most, right? Is conditioning, especially if he's going to be playing a lot more games. But I think that he played way more games than they thought he was going to this year. I don't think anybody thought he was going to play as many games. They thought maybe they kind of break him in a bit slower this year, but he took the ball and ran with the guys and played really well. So
like
I don't
we
know
say
about
that, and you think about it, like think about this, guys. Like he played 40 games in the USHL last year. He only played 35, and we're saying he played too much. So the schedule there is not like you're talking like half the schedule of the AHL. The sooner they get this guy to the AHL, the better. He's not going to get in better shape going to college. Like they can say what they want. You look at our goalies; they're pro by the time they're 20, coming out of the WHL, and they need 3-4 years to develop. So any additional time in the NCAA with this guy delays his career and his development, frankly.
Yeah, he might become a little bit more complacent if he stays.
What else does he have to prove there?
To add more, Michael, about that is like when you play with a good team and NCAA, like if you remember, like Portillo for the Michigan, right? He didn't get a lot of shot per game. And you're right about the condition of leaving in NCAA compared to like American Hockey League. I think a short term would be a benefit for him to be right away in American Hockey League because next year Boston College is going to be another powerhouse. F. Perrault, Smith, and Leonard returning all three together over there. And I think there will be more benefit for him to play in American Hockey League for Fowler one more right away. And he's going to get, I think it would be good for him also, Marco Inartap, to be part of the Laval Rocket. Next year, Laval Rocket is exactly what they should to be with the prospect they draft from Ken Hughes. And now you have Ray Barker, you have Hudson, you have Mayu over there, and then you have Tobes will be there, and then you have Farrell that can go the way like this. So I think for me, for this fans, I would jump in right away with Fowler and NHL's and American Hockey League. But again, great year for Fowler. He's on nomination for the goaltender of the year and NCAA. And what everything said, Marco, about him, you nail it for sure.
One more thing about that, look at his performance at the World Juniors, guys. And Trey Augustine's had like an otherworldly season, including at the World Juniors. And I think if you look at his numbers, he was sub 900 save percentage. Yes, he got 3-0, but no Russians in that tournament. There's a little bit of a drop from the top teams to the bottom. So he gets the wins, but the performance difference between him and Augustine, you're talking a 936 versus like an 890. So when you see a guy like that against the top competition and you see a drop off normal 920 to an 890, that worries me.
I don't remember his save percentage being that low at that tourney, really,
Sub 900. So, I mean, it's only 3 games, but, it's not like the competition this year is like past years, right? Like the prior year was a much stronger year, offensively especially. So I think you just look at it and you go, he had a 926 in the USHL. He had a 920 something in NCAA. What does he have to prove there? He's only going to get 35 games in NCAA. He needs to start having a better workload and pro training habits.
Well, that's one thing, guys, is that, I agree, right? Like that would be the ideal, but, at some point there's also kind of a massaging to happen there, right? Like I think Montreal ideally would have liked to have Reinbacher play in the AHL this year as well, right? But he hasn't signed his ELC yet, Fowler, right? So there's kind of like a little bit of a courtship that happens there too. So
he can't.
I think it really depends, like how he feels, right? Like he might want to spend another year there. I think we all agree it'd be better for him to be in the AHL, but we'll have to see. From what I'm hearing, is like he's planning to go back for another year. And
you used a great example, like Reinbacher, like our scout at the draft, which is Sandro Benin, is our European scout, and he is an assistant general manager in the Swiss League. I asked him because he went very high, obviously, and he said he's 1 year away from the NHL. That's kind of what he said. Like he felt that he was the most NHL ready defenseman of all of them. He looked, again, there's a guy that kind of looked out of shape. He went back. He did not have a good team to play on. So it probably
Horrible.
would have helped. Like that was not a great situation, but I think he persevered. Like he's a pretty calm, resilient guy. But man, he's got like really good raw skills. I think we all kind of like raised an eyebrow a little bit about how high he went, but now we're understanding like he's going to be a really good defenseman. He'll at least be a top 4 defenseman. And I think you're right. Like if he had come over to the AHL, he might have got some NHL games this year.
Yeah.
What kind of? Sorry, I was just going to say, Michael, what kind of defenseman do you project him to be?
He's got better offense than you realize. I don't know if that means he's going to be a guy that pushes the play. Like he might be a really good number 3-2 type guy. And I think worst case is like a number 4 he can rely on. He's got a pretty good shot. He's a good passer. He's pretty calm. He's got an active stick. He's a good skater, and he's tough to play against. Is that a number 1? I don't think so. Like I think you're going to have more of these smaller dynamic guys that push the play up, and then he plugs the holes for them. I feel like but he'll still contribute offensively. Like you never know. He might be like, maybe he gets like 7-8 goals a year and 30-40 points. Like he might be that type of guy.
So a comp that we've heard is kind of like Adam Larson kind of guy. Like, do you have like an NHL comp that you would use for him?
That's why I say, because I think Seattle has everyone's number 4 defenseman, including Adam Larson, and that could be a reasonable comparison. He might, he could go either way. He might have 18, 20 points a year, but I don't know. You get the feeling he wants to, contribute offensively. Like you see, he'll pinch in a little bit. He's a real smooth skater. So I think he might have a little more offense, but it just depends, like sometimes you watch him and he kind of just takes the defensive responsibility more than the offense. But I don't know. I think he'll be a little bit of everything. He seems like he's pretty well-rounded. We'll see.
Awesome. Great to hear that about that. So I keep one player for Marco too. So I think it would be a good way to do that. And then we can add more from Marco in our tap. But I want to talk about Oliver Kapanen, Michael. Draft, I believe, 60 overall pick in 2021 for the Montreal Canadiens. He has right now, guys, a crazy playoff and played the Liga at 19, 20. He just turned 20 years old. He has 7 points and 4 games, 4 goals, 3 assists. He tied the game, and then they have a winning goal and overtime. And everything he touched, he have 20 points the last 23 games. It's a player is underrated, or as a player nobody talk about. It's always been Owen Beck in the last 6 months, and nobody talk about Kapanen. And then slowly, properly, he show up some great hockey right now. And playing Liga, guys, is not easy. And a top scorer in the playoff right now. I know it's a small number of the game, but still, to dominate the way he does at that age and that league, it's not easy, guys. So, Michael, you can talk about Oliver Kapanen if you remember when the draft year, and what do you think about him?
He's one of those weird players where you kind of got to project and you go, whose job is he going to steal in an NHL lineup? And I think the key for him is going to be, can he play effective third line type minutes in the NHL at some point where he can contribute a little bit offensively? And yet, I don't know if he's got real super high end offense. Like that league is good. It's definitely an elite league, but it's not the NHL, obviously. So it's kind of like, it's good that he's doing it so young. He's got real good skill set, right shot type player, but then you got to go, well, does the offense translate? And I think that's the big question with him. Like, is he going to be a 20, 25 goal scorer in the NHL? I think that would be a stretch for me. Like, to me, I think this is a guy that you hope can do defensive things, plays quick, is a glue guy. If he has to, flexes up when guys are hurt under the second line, but more likely you're like, can he come in, play a third, fourth line and do those types of duties and then be an effective player? And I think that's really what he's got to be able to do to be in the NHL personally.
Michael, or in our tap, or Marco?
Well, I think you're right. Like, I don't think anybody that's kind of looked at it, I don't think anybody's expecting him to come in and eventually crack a top 6 role in Montreal, right? Like more, I think people maybe you've had him penciled in as somebody who could maybe, replace like a Jake Evans, and that the,
Right.
ceiling wise, like maybe he kind of can come in and platoon for you on the third line. But to me, again, it's a right hand big guy. His face off percentage is pretty good down there. He cares. He has good details in his game as well too, and plays both sides of the puck pretty well. So maybe the offense doesn't translate for sure, like doesn't project to the NHL, but I think kind of like found money though, and say what you want. Like I think, yeah, like I think this is a Trevor. No, like, well, this is still Trevor Timmins and Bergevin era pick, right? So say what you want about those guys, but definitely some value picks that they added to the pipeline. So yeah, lots to look forward to with him, and he hasn't signed his ELC yet, guys. Like a lot of these guys are talking about haven't signed an ELC. Like Montreal is kind of running out of contracts as well too, right? So they're gonna have to. That's the thing when you take so many picks over it's crazy the amount of players that Montreal's drafted, and then we have like another 23 picks I think in the next 2 drafts. Like at some point you have to start liquidating some of these assets, right? Like
I mean, this is not a guy you go, this guy's a lock to be in the NHL. He could be a career AHL player. That's kind of the bubble he's on, right? So they're probably in no hurry to give him an entry-level contract. It would probably be a 2-way contract. And does he want that? No.
One thing you're going to remember, he have a great mindset. Like he's really, he grew in the Kapanen family,
I was going to say, that's a legendary family.
Yeah. So he is a guy like he's going to be. And this year, what I like for him from the year before, and Yamo mentioned that, because I see a lot of game of Kapanen this year. He developed his 200 game center, and that will maybe helping him to have a spot in the NHL. Have a great release, have a great wrist shot, Kapanen, and I think he's a little bit underrated like in French, sous radar, nobody il regarde Kapanen, but I think he could become a good hockey player in the future. But again, the time will tell us. He just need to grow, everything like that. And then finishing that segment before we got a couple of questions, people in the chat. Thanks everybody to be a part of the show. If you are just pop up, welcome in the show. We have Michael Devellano as a special guest tonight. It's other Montreal Canadiens prospect, and I'm talking about Hudson, Johnny Weekend, Owen Beck, and of course Florent Jacquet. So if one of you guys want to talk about specific players, everything like that, it's maybe the time to do it. And then we can move on with the question. We have for Michael and NHL. We're going to talk about this tonight. So anybody want to start that?
I mean, Beck's in a really good spot with, coming in the host Memorial Cup team. He's Woody, very honest player. He's very consistent. People want to see have more offense, but he's always going to be on the right side of the puck. And sometimes I don't know if he's got like elite creativity or anything, but he could be a real effective player at the next level. And he's going to get an opportunity to play for what I dream of, which is a Memorial Cup. Maybe we'll see him there with an Everett team. Would be nice. I mean, you guys in Saginaw.
Yeah, some of us, like some have heard, around Beck that, because when you think of Owen, most Habs fans kind of picture, okay, so he's upside wise, he's gonna maybe be like the future third line center. He's got really, really high effectiveness on faceoffs in particular is kind of like his signature thing, right? So you think, okay, so really good on faceoffs, can play center, right hand shot. Maybe he's going to be like a shutdown center kind of third line guy. But with that though, like, if you looked at his performance at the World Juniors and even some of the feedback that we hear, with him in his junior team is like, we kind of think he's going to be a 200-foot player, but there's still a lot of room for growth with him. Really understanding the 200-foot game. If that's going to be his chair, playing in the NHL. Okay, now you're just teasing us with Lane Hudson highlights. Okay, well, we can pivot to that.
No, it's because it's Hudson, Beck, and F. Holler.
Okay. That's a way second.
The partners.
Wait, what?
Yeah,
that was weird.
Yeah.
But
so with that, guys, like, sorry, go ahead, Michael.
I was just saying he's not really a big guy, right?
No, he's not. But I think he's more of a glorified Jake Evans. I think he
That's
can do a little bit more than Evans does. And if that's what he does, if that's his ceiling, I think that's very good. I think he brings a certain intelligence to the game as well. He learns quickly. I agree with Marco that he has made some bad air judgment in the past, but he's the type of guy that you're going to need in that depth role if you want to go far. So I'm a bit bullish on him because I think he can fit the description as long as you're not asking too much out of him.
I mean, I think he's played 8 or 9 World Junior games, and has he got any points?
Very few,
I think
very
so.
few. Well, I think in the
Did
first year, I think he only played like one game, right? He came in, he had to
He
fly
got caught
in.
up after the injury of Colton Duck
Yeah,
on
yeah.
that one. I think he had 1 point on that.
He had an assist in the first
Yeah.
one. He had a goal in the second.
Yeah. I think the
yeah,
thing with
so
Montreal is that they like to bet on character, right? So the one thing we know about Owen Beck is that he's like, I think he was the Scholastic Player of the Year last year, and like, so he's a dedicated guy, really smart guy. So he's going to be a pro, right? So he's going to approach everything as a pro. So I think Montreal is willing to work with guys like that, and if he does have that, third center kind of ceiling to have on a really really good team, Montreal will be able to get that out of him because they have a good development system, and he's certainly a guy that's dedicated to his craft. So I still have good hopes for him, but I just because he had a really good camp his first camp here, Michael. I don't know if you remember, but he had a really good camp. He almost played games as well, coming out of the camp and everything. He played some exhibition games. So I think the expectation level got really high for Beck for a lot of Habs fans. Not like maybe Ryan Paling high after he scored his hat trick there in his first ever NHL game,
that
but
worked out.
probably a little bit too high than they should be, right? So we're trying to
I think
manage
so.
people's expectations with him, right, a little bit, but definitely some good upside, and he'll probably play in the NHL. Like I would bet money that he'll play in the NHL.
I think he will. I think the challenge increasingly is if you're not a high skill player, you have to have intangibles, but you have to contribute offensively. It's really tough for a team not to have third and fourth line scoring now.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
good
It's
thing
just
he's developed
He
that.
will.
He
He
have
will.
81 point this year at 57 games. So this is a good improvement about him. And I think for me, he developed his 200 game this year also compared the year
Did.
before that. And I think for me, that's a good set. I would say to you in our tap, he's better to Jake Evans. Like talent-wise,
Yeah.
skill-wise, he's a better hockey player. Jake Evans, 7th-round pick in NHL, is limited with the skill overall. You're going to see an Owen Beck a little bit better. And my ceiling for him, my opinion, he could be really close to Philip Dano as a cover player in NHL, and he can win face-off, and hopefully he can reach the level of Anton Lundell in NHL. That would be my
Ooh,
hope about that.
ooh.
Lundell so far, great defensive players, but not offensive player yet in NHL.
Doesn't have that size though, coach, for
he's
Lundell,
not big.
I'm
and his
sorry.
speed too. Not big enough
He's
to compare to
No, I
Lundell,
said
and
he's not. If he can reach the level of Lundell, I think that would be a good way about that. Lundell's still a third center in NHL right now, and but he have a better long career. I think Lundell's going to be a little bit better at the when he's going to get at 24, 25 years old. About that, the only weekend we have a Lane Hudson and also Florent Jacquet. Just quick on Florent Jacquet, he scored 34 goals this year, complete his season with 65 points, 63 games.
That's awesome.
Grow already a lot during the summer. Good players overall with the Brentford, and is another Jacquet 2.0 for the Montreal Canadiens. The future, we'll see what he's going to look like. I believe, and for the best for him to return next year in the OHL, that'll be good for him at 20 years old. Yeah, no, he cannot play in American Hockey League. Some people asking me about that, so he cannot get there for him. And then finally, I want to finish with Lennartson. So in our time, you want to talk about Lennartson, if you don't mind.
Sure. I was going to talk about Florian and leave Hudson to to Marco, but sure. I mean, Hudson, what can you say? I think he's nominated for the Baker Award again this year, trophy. The guy's just got very solid moves. I like the fact that this year, I mean, his biggest knock obviously is his size, right? And size and weight, but those are things that, at least weight wise, he can build up some muscle mass there, and that takes care of that. And he's also grown a couple of inches over the time that they drafted him. So I don't have too many um, limitations or hesitations that he's not going to translate to a good, solid NHL player. I think it's there in the cards. This guy can skate, he can stick handle, he can score, as we're seeing in these highlights. But more importantly, he makes the players around him that much better. And for Montreal, one of the biggest complaints we've had all year long is how the puck keeps getting reversed in the defensive zone. And this is the kind of defenseman that can carry that puck out single-handedly, very much like a Quinn Hughes. Not that I'm right now comparing him to that, but he seems to be of that ilk. So I look forward to his next stage, which will probably be with Laval.
Watching the games this weekend, Coach, like one thing I noticed evolve in his game is a little bit. Like obviously, we already know kind of what he can do offensively, right? But to me, it's the anticipation that he had picking off plays in the defensive zone and breaking out. That was something that you could see once in a while in his game, but man, like his anticipation level, like really being able to kind of jump in and break up plays and then rush the puck out like really quickly. There's so many examples of that I saw in that, especially in that Boston College game. I think he was probably their best player that game. Like Celebrini had a good game as well, but like just the anticipation. He's really worked on his defending this year, probably at the detriment of his point total. If he really wanted to go hot dog, he probably could have gotten way more points. But I think the Habs management team, I think it was Jeff Gordon, did an interview, and he was very complimentary for the coaching staff at BU about how they've been working with him to really round out his game. We know that for him to be able to defend at the NHL level, he's not going to be able to body guys, right? It's all going to be about having a good stick, and he's going to have to defend with his feet. So the only two things I had. Yeah, for sure. But you still have to be able to win those one-on-one battles, right? And regardless, if you play him with Reinbacher, who's really nice and rangy, that's going to help. But he still needs to be able to cover his wing. So the only questions I had was, his backward skating. Like he's really shifty and he's very agile, but his actual foot speed, or for him to be, like he's really agile, like shifty, but for somebody somebody that size, he's going to need to really have high end speed in order to defend with his feet, to be in a position to defend with a stick too, right? So confidence levels. Sorry, go ahead, Michael. What?
Do you think he's a four-way skater? Like, does he have that lateral transition, or is he? Because I don't know. Maybe it's my imagination, but I feel like he turns to try to defend a lot, and that's going to be a real problem, I think, at the NHL. Like, if he can't skate backwards and laterally at an elite level, then he's going to be limited to offensive roles. It's going to be really tough 5-on-5. Is he $150?
I think he's.
I think he's past that.
Probably more
high. He's up to 160 now.
Yeah, 160. Yeah. That's tough. Yeah, I mean that's definitely challenging. So he's got, and you got to think like he's 2 years older than Macklin Celebrini. Yeah. So those are your two. There's a big development, and not that they're different positions, obviously, but he's definitely got a great skill set, and you hope he ends up being like an Adam Fox type guy. But he might take some time, and we'll see how he responds at the next level, obviously. But he's got a lot of potential. Is he better than Seamus Casey?
Oh yeah,
I don't think he's as.
I think so.
It's not same level. Like this is like boom. If you look about Quinn Hughes, guy, 5 goals with Michigan and 37 games. He has only 29 points with Michigan.
Versus 13.
Quinn Hughes. Hudson is 45 points per year.
How
I
old was
don't know
Quinn
why
Hughes?
the people don't see this unique players we have in their hands. I don't know. You are so worried about his skating, his physical, his size. The guys play. Did you watch Quinn Hughes when he talk about him on the weekend at the interview with TVS Sport? How he's really
Mhm.
believe use. He said, for me, it's not what he's going to be at 21 years old. It's what he's going to become at 24 years old. He took me a couple of years to understand the speed of the game, to understand what I need to improve every year. I said the same thing to my brother Luke in New Jersey. Just continue to be consistency this year. Don't worry about the rest. Be just learning 1 year at a time. And when you're going to reach the 23, 24, you need to be at your best at those years. And that's coming from Quinn Hughes at the only weekend. So for me, I don't know why we are so worried about Leonardson. The guys produce. Not many players playing the NCAA produce at the
Sure.
level he did. He was only 12 points. I can understand that. But Quinn Hughes, do you know how he was his weight when he was drafted in NHL?
And he must have a buck
He's
55.
150. No,
So
150. I think.
it's not that. It's just I don't know why the fans, does not believe on him. So what? Anyhow,
I mean, listen, the Hughes brothers are like another level of skating, though. That's like
Yeah.
that's special.
There's a
That's a player who can skate, you know. And
I think there's a
honestly,
difference.
right, compare him to Victor Mete. So
Well, no.
it's
Well, no.
it's like
Well,
guys, it's like Victor Mete and Quinn Quinn Hughes, right? Who do you take? Right? It's just it's not the same level. I don't know what the fans are talking about him. So anyhow, we have to move on for that, and then we have a couple of questions in that chat we got. So we're going to move on with that part, and let's see what's happening here. And I'm going to go back on this one here and see from the bottom to the top. There we go. Bob's have the first question. Michael, what are your thoughts on the Caden Langstrom, especially his shot and his scoring ability?
I mean, there's some parallels between him and Quinton Byfield. You know, he's a big athletic guy. He's got really, high end skill set. I always worry a little bit when I see a guy's got a lot more goals than assists, especially. So that's kind of always kind of a little bit of a red flag. You got to watch him. But Macklin's like that, which is weird. Like Macklin, I know is a really elite playmaker, but he tends to actually have more goals than assists, which is a little strange. But he's going to be a good player. The question is what? Like, is he a centerman, a winger? He's you look at what happened with Quinton Byfield, like he really found a place on the wing. I don't know if he'll ever be a center, maybe because he's still got like a high ceiling. And I think that's what you project with this guy. Like he might struggle, and then all of a sudden he'll be there and you'll be surprised. So I think that's probably what you'll see with him over time. Like he'll go somewhere and he's got that upside. He could be a really, really special player that way.
Yeah, there's not a lot of.
He's a very good skater.
There's not a lot of centers that like you think of like how many centers have there been that are kind of shoot first, right? Like Olli Jokinen,
Mm-hmm.
there's not a lot of those kind of guys, right? Like so yeah, like that's the book on Lindstrom, right?
Yeah.
He might end up being a winger. But he thinks the game pretty well too, right? Like I think the hockey IQ is there enough, but he's not really somebody that's going to kind of like, gain the zone, slow the play down. He's more kind of like a north-south kind of guy, which makes you think winger more so than somebody who's, kind of taking the zone, slowing things down, looking for seams, looking for teammates and stuff like that. So a little bit different. Not to say that he can't have that in his game though, right?
Look, yeah. Yeah, if
Larger.
Montreal is fortunate to get him at that position, I think the flexibility that he offers you to be either a centerman or a winger, like we're still experimenting with Doc at center, but who knows if maybe he's more valuable on the wing and Lindstrom is the centerman or vice versa, and those two on a line together could, with their size and speed, I think that they could do a lot of damage.
The guy that's on that team you really should care about is Gavin McKenna. That's the If you haven't seen him yet,
Coming
he's
up.
15,
Coming up,
97.
Michael,
That's a
what are the biggest needs for the Red Wings in the offseason?
The biggest needs? Well, they're going to have to review goaltending and D. That seems to be obvious. I think they're going to have to assess, like, does Berggren fit into their plans right now? It's like, it doesn't feel like it, but he's a real smart, talented player. Like, it'll be interesting to see what they do with David Perron. I think the first thing they're going to do is sign Patrick Kane. That was a pretty phenomenal outcome. But, I think there's a lot of dissatisfaction with the Petries and Sherratts of the world and Justin Halls. So I think people are looking like, well, Edvinsson is obviously their second or third best defenseman already. He might have been that out of training camp. And I think you just project him being in the lineup. Then you question of, do they do anything with guys like Albert Johansson or William Wallander? Because they're kind of on the, at that point in their career, and Jonathan Berggren. So I think what they're really looking for is, how do I maybe add one more high-end offensive piece? Is JT Compher really the second line center? And then how do you get like a 3-4 defense pair that's, better than what you've got? Because you're projecting that Simon Edmondson's ready to step in.
It's going to be hard to. It's going to be hard to move off Petrie. Well, Petrie's got just 1 year left, right? But Sherratt's still got what?
A lot.
He has more. Yeah,
he's not that expensive. I don't know if they dump him. Like, there's some things about Sherratt you like, but it's not. He does stupid stuff. Like, he's a non-offensive defenseman that pinches in. What are you doing?
Yeah. We know all about that, Michael. We watched them pretty closely for a couple years.
Yeah, I don't know. But I mean, you've got to be excited when you watch Simon Edvinsson. You're like, oh, this guy's 6'7", and he skates like that, and he handles the puck like that, and he thinks like that, and he's improved defensively. He's got a little bit of meanness. Like, that's a pretty exciting player for them. So then you're like, okay, you got Wallman, Edvinsson, Seider. Then you're really just worried about that 3 through 5 spots.
So, Michael, we have to ask you this, right? Because as Habs fans, a lot of us are having the conversation around, okay, so, do we continue to kind of follow the rebuild? We know that Hughes and Gordon hit the accelerator a little bit by trading for Doc and Newhook and stuff like that, right? But so what we're seeing in Detroit is Yzerman kind of took a bit of a left turn, signed some free agents like Kopp, some of the D guys that you mentioned. How does it feel as a Detroit fan? How is Wings? How's the Wings fan base taking that decision? And what advice do you think there would be for Habs fans about waiting out the rebuild versus trying to accelerate a little too quickly by signing free agents?
They have a ton of prospects and they have a ton of draft picks. Like, there's nobody with that volume in the NHL that the Red Wings have. When you start adding it up, like, you got Sebastian Casa and you got Trey Augustine in net. Okay, they're going to take time, and then on top of it, they got that Carter Gylander kid. So you look at every position, they've got depth at veteran, depth at prospects. And it'll just be the best will rise. So I don't think they've sacrificed anything by bringing in some of the veteran guys. Like, the Daniel Sprung thing has turned out pretty well. Like, that was kind of a Moneyball thing. It's like, hey, we can get 18, 20 goals from the third line. Perfect. Like, there's no reason why that's going to hold anybody back. And look who needed extra time. Marco Kasper needed time in the AHL to find his game a little bit. Berggren has nothing to prove in the AHL, but may not fit in the NHL with them, just because whatever their bias is against his size and maybe some of the defensive liability. So I think you're just going to see they're just trying to continue to pile on talent. And I don't see anything over for Montreal. I think they're just starting. Like, you don't have, elite superstar talent yet either, right? Like, I think Detroit's shown you can get away with a certain amount of it with depth, but they're still not in the top third of the league. And look at what happened when they lost their friggin' number one centerman, who's like not a top of center, and they lose 9 games or whatever. Like,
I think though, Michael, what maybe Marco may have been alluding to is the fact that last year there was a bit of a period of awakening for Detroit. If you recall, almost 2/3 of the year in, they played 3 games against Ottawa that they lost all three, and that kind of
Mhm.
turned everything around on the axis. And that's when you saw Yzerman go after some veterans that could come on the team and at least give them that experience of how to win and go from there. Because, as you said, that they are stacked in terms of prospects. But do you think that was good move moving forward, or is it something they could have waited on maybe one more year?
No, I don't know. I don't know what they gain by doing that. Like they've shown that they can pull out talent as they have historically with later draft picks. They're developing even those guys with high, like look at how long Simon Edmondson is going to take to get there, but he's going to be, a super talent. Marco Casper, Nate Danielson are different types of talent, right? They're not going to be super elite. Who's the super elite talent? They need more time, obviously, but they're showing that you can do it with depth. And I think that, to wait like and hope that you get a first overall draft pick's real tricky, right?
Yeah.
And you look at what Lucas Raymond did when Larkin was out, and you're like, man, that if you look at that draft year, who's the best player in that draft year? I mean, you would say Stützle. Is Lucas Raymond number 2? Like he's certainly the second highest scoring. Now Quinton Byfield's coming along. Alexis Lafreniere is having a good year, but arguably 1, 2, 3 might be those guys. I mean, Lucas Raymond showed like anger and grit in that period. He's like, well, I don't like losing. And he's got real high level hockey IQ. So that he could take another jump. Like that could be like a Henrik Zetterberg or I don't know if he's Pavel Datsyuk, but he definitely could be a Henrik Zetterberg type player for them for a very long time. He's only 21 or something, right? Like, is he a 22-year-old? This is his fourth year. So.
I think he's 23.
Yeah.
So he's like.
So no regrets. So you know that tattoo, Michael, like no regrets, but there's like an E missing, like a no
again.
regrets. What is Cop still has a bunch of years left. Like, I guess the question is like with Detroit, you have all this, so you're excited about this pipeline of talent, but you have these veterans now that are kind of like in the way a little bit, right? So do you think he pulled the trigger a little too quickly, or?
No, I don't think so at all. I mean, I think you can't continuously lose and expect to build a culture of winning. Like their Grand Rapids team's real strong. The guys that are down there, like it's the depth of defensemen, the depth of goaltending at every level, and then you've got lots of forward options. And it's not like Marco Casper's, stealing a spot in the lineup. Joe Veleno's on there, and he's just inconsistent offensively. Like, it's really hard to project his ceiling. Rasmussen's what he is, right? He's really useful, big third line guy. So I don't know, by finishing with, not bringing a Patrick Kane, not bringing in DeBrincat. DeBrincat's young enough, but he's inconsistent. Patrick Kane's showing them that they can compete now. Like, I don't think bringing in guys like Ghost, Sherratt, and Petrie are holding any defensemen back. So I don't know. I really have a hard time projecting that it's really hurt anything, unless you're thinking that all their picks are going to be first overall, which, I mean, they finished last and they didn't get first overall. So I don't know how that worked out. But imagine they picked Alexis Lafreniere.
Last question, Michael. Just this last, I guess, I want to say about 10 games or so that Detroit's played, which they haven't played well. Do you think it was mostly attributed to the absence of Larkin and not being able to fill in that spot?
JT Compher couldn't play second line in Colorado. Why could he play first in Detroit? I mean, I think you see the deficiencies in his game. Andrew Kopp is, fans have turned on him real quick. He's not super useful in that role. Veleno is not going to be high end enough. So, not having a number 2 center iceman at this point, it's a big problem. I mean, he's got speed. He's very consistent, and he does lead the team. And you can see they pull that big piece out, and it's a problem. Like, he's a point-a-game guy. I remember at the beginning of the year, Intertap asked me, can he get 90 points? And I think my answer was maybe he started fast, because he's not a 90-point player in my opinion, right? But I think just because he started fast and then you see he evens out. So as he's really good.
I had him in
For
my
them,
hockey pool. That's why.
man, honestly though, like that, would you not rather have a star number one centerman and him as number two? Like that's a Stanley Cup contending team. Is that a Stanley Cup contending team with him as your number one? And then you lose them and they fall apart? Like, they still have holes there. I think they project Nate Danielson could be a second line center. But if you look at the way Nate is, like Nate's qualities are, as my Portland counterpart said to me when we were scouting, goes, I didn't realize he's got that dog in him. Like he's just like big, strong. He like takes your best player and makes him look like a baby. That's what he's saying. It's like, okay, and then he scores. You can play him in all situations. So, and he's a very good skater, very underrated skater. So you're like, okay, maybe he can be a Ryan O'Reilly type guy. That's kind of what they're hoping for him. But they don't really, until then, like it's, Comfort's got problems, like Ghost of Bear's got problems, Petrie's got problems, Sherrod's got problems. Like those are not long-term solutions.
Yeah.
This is a great example of the when you don't have a generational players like a McDavid or a Bedard or kind of player like that. It's harder to become a great team can win the Stanley Cup. I know it's not going to happen, but you have to minimize your mistake when you build that team, when you rebuild that team, because you don't have those kind of players to carry on you for a long time. It's not guaranteed you win the Stanley Cup with them, but it's easier to build a better team when you have a player like those kind of players like that. That's why the problem with Detroit. That's going to happen right now with Montreal. They cannot minimize. They cannot make a lot of mistakes. They don't have those kind of players. Can have 100 points on every single year, and a McKinnon kind of player like that. So would be interesting. Would be the next move. We have a question from Wes. Said, "Will Detroit make the playoff?" So let's start with yes or no with an tap.
Sorry, I missed that question, Coach. It blanked out.
Detroit is going to make the playoff or not?
Yeah, you know what? Like, I think they're going to correct the ship here. It's hard. Like as much as the Washington story is a nice story to pursue here, and Ovechkin's really turned it on now, and Charlie Lindgren has been very, very, very solid. I think he's been probably the major reason they've challenged here and have that last spot right now. Yeah, I gotta believe that Detroit is going to eventually end up on top. I think they even have a game in hand right now on Washington, if I'm not mistaken, and they should be able to hang on. It's the other way around. Okay, so that's a bit tougher. But
right now, the odds of them making the playoffs right now is 50%. They have a 50%.
And Washington?
Detroit is 50%, and Washington right now is at 57%.
Yeah, so they're close. They're close. To me, what's been the remarkable story is how that last spot has been booted away by so many teams that have had opportunity after opportunity to take over. And you've seen it, with the likes of the Islanders. You've seen it with the Devils. Buffalo at one point was putting a string of games together. Maybe a bit too little, too late for them. Detroit could have ran away with it. Washington now has put in a streak. Like it's going to be hard. It's whoever in these last 12 games hangs on and plays solid the rest of the way, because it's going to take a streak in order to get in.
Did it all go wrong, Alex, or Michael, when Alex Lyon kind of turned into a pumpkin again at midnight? Is that kind of where everything went to shit, kind of? Or?
Well, I think you're seeing the reality of this 3 goalie situation where you've got a guy that's never played more than 24 NHL games, and you're expecting him to play 44. It's like pitching in baseball where they're counting pitches. So I think that's just the reality of it. And they got, what's interesting, if you've seen they've gone back to Reimer and they got back on track a little bit. And he's capable of doing that once in a while. He's always going to end up probably like a 500 guy, but his save percentage is weirdly always, above average, which doesn't make sense when you watch him because he'll steal a game and he'll lose you a bunch of games. Like, but I just
Jake
think
Allen,
Jake Allen's
Same.
type of goalie, right? So I think that it's tricky right now. But I think the truth is, if you look at Washington, they have no Kuznetsov. They've got no Backstrom. Like, they have nobody down the middle. They got Connor McMichael and Dylan Strome.
And the thing that worries me the most is the goal differential. I think they're at a minus 25 or like I find it hard to believe that they're going to hang in there, But stranger things have happened.
Right? This is Seattle from last year. You're like, how is this team in the playoffs? Like, their save percentage garbage. Yeah. You're like, well, you see it. It falls apart at some point. And you got to give credit to the new coach. Like, he's done a really good job. But I don't know. Does anybody believe Connor McMichael is a NHL #1 centerman?
No. And
no.
Yeah, even Strome, like, it's kind of a stretch, right? Like, he was kind of kicking around the league for a while. Yeah. So I don't know how they're doing it. It's like smoke years right now. You've got Charlie Lindgren, who is playing way over his head right now. It's just weird. Like, it's berserker world. Like, everything that it's like the nightmare before Christmas kind of.
Like, look at their D. Who is Martin Ferravary? Right? Like, when he signed his extension, I was like, who?
Yeah.
You don't even realize this guy's been in the NHL for a bunch of years, right? So it's just weird. Like, they got one legit NHL star defenseman in Carlson. I like Rasmus Sandin, but then after that, you're like, ooh, Nick Jensen was like a washout in Detroit, yet he's their number 4. So then you look at, like, okay, who's in, Tom Wilson can't stay in the lineup for his life. And you're dealing with consistency of comfort. And who knew Charlie Lindgren was going to be what he is? It just doesn't make sense. At one point you thought it, but this is a nice kind of Scotty Wedgwood story, right? Like, where it's like, oh, you just overlooked them, but it doesn't make sense on paper.
It doesn't. And then, like, they have Monta that's finally starting to play well. They sell him at the deadline, and they still keep winning.
And he's terrible. He's got. Does he have 1 point since he's gone to Vegas?
Yeah, he hasn't been very good.
No, back
By the
to
way,
the key's going to be they have 2 games between amongst themselves, so that'll, I think, determine it. They play Washington twice. So
1-0 right now, guys.
Is Vegas going to make the playoffs?
Yeah. I think the West is settled. I think the West is settled.
Wait, you think St. Louis?
Vegas is.
Are they losing tonight?
It's still 1-0.
This is the critical game.
Yeah,
so St. Louis
Nashville's the best team in the NHL.
Afford it.
How did Nashville become the best team in the NHL? That makes no sense.
When they canceled their field trip there, they turned it around.
Crazy. Like, you got to say that's the Ryan O'Reilly, Barry Trotz factor, and you got to give a lot of credit to a coach that I probably wrote off in Florida with Andrew Burnett. Like, he's just perfect fit there. They've got 3 key pieces down the middle plus Philip Forsberg, right? Like, you got Yossi, Saros, and Rohr, and then you've got Forsberg, who's just a machine, and maybe one of the more underrated forwards in the last 12, 15 years or whatever he's been in the NHL. It feels like forever. Is he a 93 or a 94 player? So it's probably
same draft year as Galchenyuk.
Yeah, there you go. Oh my God, that's wrong.
Well, we shouldn't be lambasting Montreal, because the team that should be lambasted is Washington, right? With that crazy trade they did for trading Forsberg for Martin Erat. Yeah, that's got to go to the annals. One of the worst deals ever. But Michael, like, you were talking about teams that
good memory.
That have. You're talking about teams that have to be built with that depth, right? Like, you're talking, Detroit not having that superstar, Montreal not having that superstar. Yeah. 2 teams that seem to do it pretty consistently and just always be winning are Carolina and Nashville, right? For the most part, Carolina, like, you can't consider Aho a generational talent, right? Like he's a really good player, like he's an elite player, but very good. But again, like they do it, and I think for Detroit or Montreal to be successful, they have to kind of follow that model. They just have to be 4 lines deep that can just kind of roll 4 lines over and just go wave after wave after wave. That's the only way that they're going to be competitive.
Who's the generational talent in Vegas?
Like, you could say Peter Angelo.
That's it. It's Peter Angelo. Like Peter Angelo is like, and coaches. I know I say this all the time because I've watched him, and he's a Toronto Junior Canadian, and I very close to that development, like watching it. And I always said, like, that's the guy. That's the reason they won the cup in St. Louis. And people are like, nah, you guys are like, nah, you make so many mistakes. I'm like, that's not what Peter Angelo's like. The man. Peter Angelo's in the room. And he's like, we're gonna win, okay? You're gonna do whatever it takes to win. That's Peter Angelo. Yeah. He has no problem being the dad of everybody in there, and he's been like that since forever. Like that's just who he is. And you saw last year, like I knew when he went to Vegas, I'm like, God, they're gonna win a cup. He's gonna be so angry that St. Louis would not give him the money that he's gonna prove. Crazy. That's the way he is. He's just got that level of
1-1 St. Louis and Vegas now tied up. 5 minutes left.
There you go.
What? How does St. Louis win hockey games?
Same thing, guys. Like actually, St. Louis kind of reminds me a little bit of Dallas. It kind of reminds me of Dallas a little bit, right? Like where they're kind of trying to do this retool. Like speaking of, like, so that Doug Armstrong, you will about him, right? But not afraid to kind of like Julian Brisebois in Tampa Bay. Not afraid to move on from guys when they're hitting, that 30 threshold, moving on from guys.
Yeah.
St. Louis reminds me a bit of Dallas, right? Like they have, that core of like veteran players that they have, but they just slowly are kind of like weaving in these young players. So St. Louis is right there, obviously they still have a couple of like good veterans that they can base around, but they're doing it with Thomas and with Kyrou and guys like that. They're right there.
But they could still miss the playoffs.
They could, right? And they probably will, right? I mean, you got to give a lot of success and kudos to Binnington too, because he had a good comeback year from what we saw last year, and then that's kept him in many games.
He wasn't in coach's pool this year, which is probably why he's doing much better.
Neighbors has been good. And
we have a couple of questions, if you don't mind, to answer, so we can move on after that. We have a couple of things. First of all, I should ask you, will Rebecca and Mayu be the right defenseman on the Habs next year? If so, how soon?
I mean, it looks like it. They have to win it at a camp. There's a lot of road there. I think Mayo's probably a little closer than Reinbacher, just because he didn't come over and he's still young. I mean, there's like 2 years difference between them.
Yeah.
So I think Mayu looks like he's done with the AHL. I don't see why he's gonna develop there. I think you probably just bite the bullet, put him in the NHL, and
we'll have to see. Like I think with Mayu, like even watching him in the preseason, I think our takeaway with him was, it's not the tools, right? Like he has all the tools to play in the NHL right now. It's really just, is he going to synthesize, what the coaching staff wants him to do, being able to kind of, less is more kind of thing on the ice, right? So just being good reads, playing within himself. So it's really up to him, and that's a cliche, I guess, in hockey, right? Like it's up to the player to decide whether they're going to make it. But with Mayu, I think that's the case because he's got all the tools right now, and certainly, he has the ability to play. So is he going to be able to kind of like play within the game plan that they want him to play in? And we'll see that during training camp. But I think he has a shot for sure. I don't see a world where both those guys play next year in the same lineup.
No, I think it'd be I think that's why he's closer.
Yeah, my point. Maybe you did not know, but Barron become a waiver player now in NHL, so they cannot send him back in Laval next year. So he don't have any trades on the summer, right? I believe Mayu and Rebecca is going to start the season with Laval Rocket. They're going to have Kovacevic, Barron, and Savard with the Montreal Canadiens, and that would keep Harris, Trouble, everybody else. So I don't see any of them going to make the NHL. Now the flip
Maybe.
side is going to be now Rebecca, Mayu, Hudson, or and if Hudson sign, no waiver, right? So you get up and down during the year. So you have an injury, something happen, you can call up Rebecca or Mayu. But I'll be honest with you, for me, Mayu is behind Rebecca. His defensive, his gap control, you have to be better to play in NHL. And unfortunately, he did not play for almost like 1 year. He missed again a lot of games. So for him, another year, Laval Rocket, it's no rush to bring them
Maybe.
and a full year in Montreal. So no reason they can play up and down with them during season. And then I think for him and Rebecca to have another a year in Laval Rocket next year, that would prepare them to fun year. Where again during summer something could change, where they're going to open up a spot on the right defense like Barron. But Barron's going to be a part of the Montreal Canadiens if nothing happened at the beginning of the year. It's happening this year with what defenseman happening this year with the Montreal Canadiens? Can't remember.
I wonder if Barron's in their plans. I don't know. I feel like he's squandered an opportunity. I don't know if they see him as a prospect or not anymore. Like I really had high hopes for him. I thought he was a good acquisition. I thought he would have played, but he had terrible camp and there's deficiencies there that maybe haven't been overcome. I don't know. I just wonder if he's even here.
When he first came back up, Go ahead, Coach. Go ahead. No, I was just going to say, when he came back from Laval, there was some promise. Like he started to play really well. Now, offensively, I'm not too worried about him. But yeah, there are gaps defensively. And also, given his size, he doesn't use it very well.
Is he that big?
He's tall, right? He's really lanky, but his center of gravity, he finds himself on his ass way too much. Doesn't engage in he can't clear in front of the net at all. Not super cool in the corners, unfortunately. So, I think again, like on the offensive side of the game, like he like I don't know if you guys saw the Laval game, but especially the game on Sunday, he was like all over the place. That's such a strong game. His offensive reads, he's really dynamic in the offensive zone.
He was the best defenseman for Laval Sunday.
So weird. Yeah. It's crazy that he has 6 NHL goals and 1 AHL goal.
Yeah. Well, he was kind of, I wouldn't say he was pouting, like it's always hard when a guy gets sent back down, played like, 40 something games or like 30 something games up with Montreal. Yeah. They send him back, it's a little bit deflating. Jack Eye's getting all the headlines down there. So kind of like a hard act to follow if you're Barron, like everybody's loving it. Yeah. So, for him, it's really just, on the defensive side of the puck, his reads, clearing the net and just winning those battles along the boards, just a killer for him. Right. So I don't know if he's ever going to have that killer mentality that and again, we're not asking him to be like, Joel Edmondson and like, lumberjack guys out there. Right. But just do your job, tie up sticks, just do the bare minimum to, so just not his instinct to do that. He really wants to be on the offensive side of the puck. So not sure.
I feel like he's how number 4, right? Like a number 4 guy that's on the second power play. That's always what I've kind of felt he would be, like more of like a Brandon Montour type guy. That's his upside. And, because I remember when you guys first saw Brandon Montour in Florida and you're like, he's not very good. He's not going to be on the team. I'm like, no, he's very smart and talented. And that's Justin Barron. Now everybody loves Montour, but I remember like trying to sell everybody.
27, 28 years old. Barron's 22, and we tried to make him like already. We should give up on him. Maybe turn that defenseman guy is 26, 27. So you have a lot of time to get there.
It's a tough position. Yeah.
And now that question for you: would Zuski have a career high this season? And this kind of Montreal team, what could we see from him when Montreal become a top team?
Well, for me, I've always sort of subscribed to the fact that I think he's capable definitely of being a point per game kind of player. He can probably even get to the ceiling of 90 points. But what I liked this year was the fact that his game became much more well rounded. Defensively, he was solid. Again, he's gone, knock on wood, another successful year without any injuries. And if he has a bad game, you can count on the fact that the next game he comes out and he's going to be correcting what he did wrong. The growth is really limitless for him. I really
Really?
I like his patience. Yeah, I think so. I like his patience. I like the fact that he's a student of the game. He thinks the game through very well. He's got a very good shot as well.
Great shot.
Yeah, he's got all the right tools, and his faceoff has improved. His faceoff winning percentage has improved this year as well. So it would be great if we had somebody else that could supplant him as the number one center and he's the number two. Then I think you're off to the races if that's the case.
It's
But
Larkin, right? It's the
yeah,
same thing. It's that issue. He's kind of a tweener, right? Like
yeah,
he's
Yeah,
not
the
ones
only
that.
difference, Michael, from Larkin is that Suzuki so far has been super healthy, right? Like he hasn't missed an NHL game,
knock on
so
wood.
Yeah,
that's a pretty yeah. But like
I mean,
the thing with Suzuki guys as well is, he's just somebody that again is dedicated to getting better. I think Coach brought this up like a little while ago, but he's been working really closely with the skills development guys to really understand where he should be on the ice. Like from an analytics perspective, like just being in front of the net. So not only is he working on his physical tools and everything else, but he's a thinking man's player, right? Michael, we've talked about this a lot. When you really look at it, Patrice Bergeron, and again, I'm not comparing him to Patrice Bergeron, but the Bruins were a really successful team with Patrice Bergeron on average scoring about 75 points a game,
yep.
75 points a season, right? So for those who say that you absolutely need a point per game or 100-point center to be successful in the NHL, I don't think that's the case. Like I think you can build a roster, with a good two-way center. Suzuki, again, is he the best two-way center in the league? But that's kind of what he's working his way towards, right? This year is a really, really big step for him. Everybody saw him as being a really good two-way center in the NHL. And last year was kind of a step back there. Like when St. Louis first got there, it seemed like they were really, really focused on just the offensive side of the game, getting Caulfield started and everything. But this year, you can see really went back and really focused on that side of the game. And one thing we can't forget about Suzuki guys and Caulfield, when we're talking about Montreal's young core, they've already made it to a Stanley Cup final, right? So when you talk about what kind of role Suzuki is going to play on a growing Habs roster, don't forget, like two really important pieces of the Habs core already been to a Stanley Cup final. You can't say that about the Ottawa Senators. You can't say that about the Buffalo Sabres. All these teams that we're kind of fighting against. When Montreal does get in the playoffs again, hopefully in the next couple of years, they might be ahead of those teams for that reason.
They got a lot of holes. I mean, that if that's your top three right now are Cole Caulfield, Suzuki, and maybe Slav, right? And there's who's after that? And there's Matheson. I don't know how long is he going to be a Canadian. He's had like an outsized offensive year. So you got to really think like what are the pieces they're actually building here? Because you don't have an obvious number one superstar goalie. You don't have a superstar defenseman. And I think in one of those positions, like or center, you've got a good NHL centerman, right? Like you've got a guy that could 75, 80 points, could. And that's what
Doc
you're hoping.
Second, you don't think
Doc
can be
is a
second?
big wild card, right? Like, is he ever going to play an NHL season, or is he Nolan Patrick? I mean, that's the risk you've got.
Well,
this is what I would say about there's nothing
they really built
about
the defense.
But the thing about Doc injuries, though, the Doc injuries, they're not chronic like Nolan Patrick, right? Like they're kind of freak things. Like it was his wrist. Like it's not like just it's not like say Josh Norris. Josh Norris has had surgeries on the same shoulder now for like 3 years in a row. that's a chronic thing that you'd be really worried about the longevity of the player. The thing that worries me less about Doc is that he had the wrist injury with Chicago. That was just kind of like a freak thing that happened at the World Juniors, right?
World Junior.
Last year he has like an issue, I think, with his back, and then this year he has the really crazy thing with his knee, with his both knees actually that happened when he got caught on the boards, right? So I would be more concerned with Doc if it was like this chronic thing, or Nolan Patrick, like you said, like a chronic concussion issue. I don't see that with Doc. Like I don't. I get that people are really skeptical, and they have this thing since he hasn't been there for a lot of games. They're almost discounting him asset, but you can't discount him. Like he's a pretty big asset.
Well, listen, I love Kirby Doc, and I think actually his brother is going to turn out pretty decent. You know, Colton. He's got more brothers coming, by the way. You know, he's probably rushed to the NHL, and I don't think that hurt. He has played 200 games, probably, right? You just worry, you know, like you just look at the number of games he's missed, and you just gotta hope a guy like that gets healthy. Some guys are just snake bitten, unfortunately. He's really, you know, smart, skilled player and good leader. Like you probably see him, unfortunately, you know, his effect off the ice more than the on the ice, but it's hard to project. Like, how do you say like this guy's going to eat up 80 games or not?
Yeah. Well, next year will be a big year for him. I think he's got to remain mostly healthy and show that he can fill in that second line center spot. I think that'll be critical for the team to move forward.
Look at Gabe Velarde. Right?
Yeah,
like Gabe is never able to get his career. Like Gabe Velarde out of that draft, I was like so pumped about Gabe. We had Jay Verade was the coach in Kingston, and I'm like, man, he is such a good player. But coming out, he had a chronic back issue as an 18, 19-year-old. And then he had another issue, and then he had another issue, and he's got another issue this year. Like every year he's got something that he's dealing with. And it's just like you see guys like that, and it's just like it's a house of cards. It's really unfortunate because you see in the limited action, like they can really produce.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
We're going to move on with the other question we got in the chat tonight. And the next one is going to be from Jan. Does it depends what Hughes does in the offseason? I expect trade. Do you expect some move from Montreal Canadiens, Marco?
I think so, Coach. Like, I don't know, man, because you know, reading the tea leaves here a little bit, listening to kind of Jeff Gordon and Kent Hughes talk over the last little while, like Michael, we were just talking about it. Like this year was a big problem in the sense that they didn't really get to evaluate the roster as much as they'd like because Doc wasn't there and he's such a big piece and Newhook was missing. But I think overall, I think their read on the situation, Gordon and Hughes, is that, you know, they're not at the end of the rebuild here, obviously, right? But they're definitely at a stage where they feel that they want to accelerate things a little bit. And like we were talking about, like they already have so many assets, and there's only so many picks that you can make, guys. Like you can only have so many contracts that you have signed, right? So I think right now Montreal is at 45 NHL contracts or something like that. So they only have like 5 open contracts. And even just in the show, we talked at least about 3 or 4 guys that they want to sign to ELCs, right? So they need to start to liquidate some of these assets, whether it's some of the prospects that they have there, especially on the left side of their D. And then you have these draft picks. Like, you know, they have a couple of first-round draft picks, you know, 2 this year and 2 next year, right? So for me, the read that I get is I think Kent Hughes and Jeff Gordon, like, again, they're not going to go and sign like, you know, a UFA, a 32-year-old UFA for like a 7-year deal or something like that. But if they can accelerate things again with similar move to like they did with like Doc or Newhook, then I think that's absolutely kind of the direction that they're going to go. And who knows, like you never know what the opportunity is going to be, right? Like there's always going to be a team that for some reason or another is looking to move a player for whatever reason. So they're going to be scanning the marketplace like crazy. Michael, the thing I've been talking about all year on the show here is I view rebuilds like in 2 phases, right? You've got the asset collection phase, and then you have the roster construction phase. So, you know, look at the Ottawa Senators, you know, they finished their asset collection phase and they never really kind of did a great job with the roster construction phase, right? Like you have all these pieces, but now you need to start kind of analyzing what you have and figuring out what you're missing and liquidating some of those assets to bring in what you need. So I think Montreal is getting close to the end of the asset collection phase.
Really?
And
Think
they're
so? Like, kind of picture
yeah.
that. Like, I don't think that they have anywhere near the depth of talent that they would need to be competitive.
Well, let's look at it this way. Like, so on defense, you'd say that they're overloaded with defensive prospects at this point, right? So,
But
so
who's
that's
top?
the issue. Pardon me?
Who's the top end guy though?
Well, I think it's more of it's still a
It
committee.
might turn out to be Hudson.
They don't have
That's
Makar, like yeah, but there's so
You're
there's only so many Makars in the league, right? So yeah, not many teams have Makar, right?
No,
But yeah, like I think you can argue that Caden Gooley, you know, a lot of people say is a number one defenseman in the league. Like maybe not offensively, but shut down number one pair defenseman. And then it's more kind of like a committee, right? Like so between Reinbacher, Gooley, Hudson, you know, Jack Guy, like everybody that we've been talking about, I think it's the decor itself is really set up really nicely, and again, probably overstacked with resources. Nobody like you know generation, but
yeah, but okay, compare that even to a Detroit or an Ottawa, right? You look at Ottawa's got Shabbat, they got Chikrin, they've got Jake Sanderson, and I don't think they have anywhere near any of those three guys. And Ottawa can't get a sniff. And then you look at Detroit, they've got Sider. They've done it through depth somehow, that because the scoring depth has worked. But they've at least got Sider and Edvinson, and that's high on offset. I don't see anybody in Montreal at that level. Do you?
Oh, timeout.
Who's Sider and Edvinson?
Caden Cooley.
I mean, I love Caden, but I do you project him as that high? Because I can see both those guys have much higher ceilings than Caden.
He played 22 minutes per game, every game, the best of the best. And for me, it's going to be the one over there for that. So for me, this the one I believe is going to be the same level of other defensemen like right now, Sanderson and like Coley at long term, and Marco is going to have a better career. Coley at Chikrin.
So you look at Jake Sanderson's played 2 seasons. He's a 2002, and Caden Gooley is a 2001. Jake Sanderson has 63 points in 144 NHL games. So you got a guy that's got 19 points.
But Michael, see, that's what I'm talking about is roster construction, right? Like, so Ottawa, again, they've done a great job of collecting these assets. But if you look at Shabbat and Chikrin and Sanderson, all three on the left side, so little overstacked on that side. Like that's like, even though they can flip them to the right, but they're pretty like Sanderson. I would say that Sanderson and Shabbat are kind of similar defensemen, right? Like there's maybe just not the right mix. It's kind of like Toronto, right? Like they don't have the right mix of defensemen. That's why you see Toronto going out and getting guys like Edmondson and
they're all left.
Exactly, right? So they're all left.
The ones that leave become good.
It makes no sense. You got one guy that's really, really good, which is Morgan Riley, and there's a huge drop off, right? But I mean, I think it's really a big stretch. If you watch Jake Sanderson game in, game out, and you know, someone argue with me about this Sanderson versus Sider, and there's a case that Sanderson might be ahead of Sider. And if you watch Sider game in, game out, you're like, this is a number one NHL defenseman. Like he's had 50, 42. He's already got 41. He's going to have almost a 50-point season again. In 3 seasons, he'll have 150 points. And he's 6'4", and he's, you know, very tough to play against defensively. Caden, I'm like, I love Caden Gooley. I just think maybe he's not a number one. So then you got to look at that. Is he a number 3? Is he a second pairing left shot, or is he a number 1 left shot? Like defenseman that needs the number 1 to play with.
Yeah,
but like consider for me, Coley, the same style of player could be like Slavin and NHL.
Okay, so then you look at Carolina, and you've got a lot of other defensemen there that are tops, right? They had to bring in a Brent Burns. They've got Pesci. Like there's a team that's doing it by committee of guys that are very, maybe a little underrated.
Well, that's the key. I think that's the key, Michael. I think that they've acquired enough defensive assets that will translate to be NHL players. And as a committee, they will do well. All they need is one of them to really excel, right?
They need
If that's a
someone
Hudson,
but yeah, Hudson's a big
we'll
shot.
wait and see. But
I will add this, Michael, for again Ottawa. You have Chikran, Shabbat, and honestly, you have Sanderson, right? After that,
Mhm.
it's going down, right?
Well, Zub's real good. I mean, I think on paper that team
Yeah,
should
but
be a
you
hell
think
of a
about
better
the young
fit.
prospect, right? Zab is 27, 28 years old. But you look at Montreal. After Coley, we have Rebarker, Mayu, Hudson right there, where they could become a top. And we don't talk about Jekai, and we don't talk about Engstrom over there. So the depth of the defenseman, Montreal Canadiens could fill up 4 defensemen in NHL compared like Ottawa. They are not really after that. They are more like third pairing defensemen. The depth of Montreal prospect is better at Ottawa on my eyes at long term.
What? You think so?
Yeah.
Who's your Tim Stutzley? Who's your Brady Kachuk?
No,
Like
I'm
those are
talking about
young.
no, he's
defenseman.
talking about defense.
I'm talking about
Defenseman?
defenseman.
As a
No,
collective, as a collective bunch.
Really?
And then the other
Okay,
thing is
so
that
who are your guys?
I
Like
think they'll be
they've
built.
got like that's a stretch to me. I think Caden Gooley is he. I don't know. I just don't see Caden. I've never seen Caden as a number 1. I've seen his ceiling as maybe a number 2, but more likely he's better suited to 3.
I bet. We're
And like
talking about
good
first
3.
pairing, second pairing, third pairing.
Right.
So you
As
have
a
those
collective
kind of
group.
defensemen like that. I think Montreal is better depth compared to Ottawa.
I think you're really underplaying how good Jake Sanderson is as a year younger.
Yeah, but it's only
He is
one.
like,
Who you have on
No,
the
you're
second
right.
pairing?
you got him, Shabbat, you've got Zub, you've also
No.
got
Zab, you
who's
talk
an
about
obvious-
27 years old, Michael. He's going to be
Okay,
30
that's not
years
like
old
that
when the
old.
Ottawas be good. So they don't
It's
have
23
some
points in
depth
57
behind that.
games plus 9. Right? Like you don't have
Trying to get
anyone
away
like
from
that.
it, bro.
It depends kind of how you're qualifying this too, right? Like, I'm hearing you reference point totals. Like point totals to me,
That's
yeah, like
everything
it's
right
important. It's important to have like offense coming. Like, well, first of all, Montreal
Mhm.
is I think is like number 2 in the league in D scoring this year, right? And that's even without some of these
Well,
young
that's
Ds.
one guy.
No.
Well, no,
No?
Matheson's obviously the majority, but like they've had a lot of the guys chip in this
What?
year, and that's with
You have Madison with 10, Barron with 6. You have Barron with 5.
Jack Eye
You
with
have
5.
Kovacevic with
I like
6. That's right there, 22. I gave you right there. And then you can go with Coley. You can go add with Jakai
Jack-Eye.
also. There you go. Savard at 5-6 goal too. They are number 2 behind Colorado at 43, 44 goal right now.
But the overall
that's
point,
shocking.
Michael, yeah, like the overall point is that so this whole question about okay, so the asset collection phase, and then you're getting into a roster construction phase. So nobody here is saying that Montreal has all the pieces to build a perfect roster now, right? But in terms of
Mhm.
like Cookie Monster collecting all the cookies, all the assets, you can only fit so many assets until you need to start kind of liquidating them and targeting those resources to the actual spots that you need in your roster, right? So the big gap, from our perspective, for sure, is elite forward talent, right? So that's really the next move for Montreal. Like, if you assume that Kirby Dach can fill that hole in the second hole as center, then at that point, then really you're just looking maybe for another 1 or 2 top wingers, to come in, and then you're backfilling the rest of your roster with new hooks and Joshua Roy's and Becks and players like that, right? So I think that puts them in a position, maybe not next year, but getting closer if depending who they pick up in the draft, depending if Hughes can flip some of those assets. And we hate to say that, use the Z word, because it's like a type of Zegras kind of player. If you can flip some assets for that,
Be careful what you wish for, because
well,
Zegras is
I know we're not saying Zegras, I'm saying a
There's
Zegras
a reason
type.
they want to dump him.
Yes, we're aligned, but it's a Zegras type player, that you can get in the marketplace by flipping some assets. Even if it's Zegras, Michael, I don't think Anaheim's a good trading partner because we have Montreal has a surplus of defensemen, and Anaheim is stocked with defensemen, so it's not really a good natural trading partner.
Every spot, it's crazy. So there's a great comparison. Like, who's your Mason McTavish? Who's your Leo Carlson? They can afford to dump a Zegras to you. They've got Troy Terry. They got so many pieces. I don't even like Troy Terry. I don't think they're gonna like Troy Terry. And then on D, like you got Zell. Like that's like a nutty.
They're stacked.
Group.
They're stacked on defense.
Stacked, right? You look at Buffalo, like someone put in here. I don't know who it was. Said Byram versus Gooley. They're a little different, but if you look at since WHL, like Byram really is a play driver, right? Like if he continues to, Caden's more solid if he's healthy, right? He's a big guy. He can be effective, like defensively. I just don't know if he has the upside offensively that you would want, where Byram can ramp his game up. So it just depends on what you need there. I love Jack Eye. I mean, Jack Eye was the greatest steal of the last 3-4 years from any team. Like, you just, where do you get defensemen like that? That's pretty special.
Yeah.
I just don't know where you project him. Like, is he a 4?
I don't think so. I don't think with the depth that they have. Yeah, I think he's more of like a 5, to be honest. Like,
okay, so that was that's pretty better. Then that makes sense. I don't know. I have a hard time projecting Caden as a number 1, maybe a number 2, 3, but
so let's project if you project the back end, Michael. So let's say 2-3 years from now, right? So let's say you've got Hudson and Reinbacher, then you've got Gooley and Mayu, then you've got Jack Eye and Barron. Wouldn't you say that's a pretty balanced decor?
That is good. So you're right. So I think the Reinbacher, Jack Eye, Logan Mayu, that's why I say Logan Mayu is really like an X factor there, right? Like, can he be a top 2 type defenseman? He's got all the tools to be a 2-1. I don't think he will be necessarily. I think that's just what it is. Gooley, I don't know. I have a hard time projecting him as a number 1. I still think there's a gap there, but you're right. There's depth there. Reinbacher, I always think is kind of like a 3-4.
Yeah,
and then
I think in mine, not all of them. That's the area of strength that they have. And so if they're gonna, I'd be shocked if they didn't going back to the original question. I'd be shocked if Hughes didn't pull off something this summer with some of the prospects that they have, the asset management that we've been talking about, right? Because you still have a couple of other defenders that are on their way up that haven't quite made as much noise, but they will be a part of the future, I believe. And the key is, how does this translate? Because to acquire just picks, I fear you turn into an Arizona. Like, these guys have top picks every single year, and they're not really translating it to victories right now. It looked promising at the beginning of the year a little bit, but you can't sign all these guys. You have to be able to be creative and think outside the box in terms of, looking for teams that make good partners and filling in the voids that you have, which would be in the forward position for Montreal.
This is a weird draft here too, right? Like, I don't know. I'm having a hard time projecting again. Like, Demidov is super slick and talented, but he's playing in the MHL, right? Like, this is not an elite league to be playing in. Like, so you go, wow, how far off is he? Siliev, people projecting him as a top 2 and 3. I'm like, is he Joe Bouwmeister, like the Russian Jay Bouwmeister? Is he Colton Parenko? Like, I don't know if that is like a top end talent again, right? Like, Berkeley Caton's got the tools, and he's bigger than people realize. I think he's like almost 5'11". So people are maybe, your hope might be maybe he slips and you grab him, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh wait, this is a really, really good player that people overlook because they think he's 5'8", and he's not.
No,
so I don't know, but it's a weird year. Like,
center, right? Like, I think just because the 5'11", you don't have a lot of centers in the NHL that are under 5'11". So worst case, if you're picking Catton, then worst case you might want to have plans for him at wing, because
that's what I.
Yeah,
I think you're right.
So
I think that's a guy you predict on the wing. Like Zane Parek's got parts of his game that are really elite, and then other parts that are like a little weird. And then you look at same thing, Caden Lindstrom. He's played 30 games, so in limited sample size.
Dickinson.
And this is the tweener issue. He's big. He's got tools. Is he a number one?
I think he has the potential to be. Yeah.
There's potentially there's probably maybe around 5 potential number one Ds in this first round of this year.
It could also be threes. That's the problem. Yeah, they're all a little weird, right? Like they've all got like a little missing.
Yeah. But
like they're more like David Jiricek than they are, like if you look at Jiricek, you're like, for a second, you're like, God, this guy's gonna be a superstar. You're like, oh no, he's back in the AHL. And that's what they could kind of be, where they take time and maybe they end up like a 3 or a 2 at the best.
Yeah.
Well,
that's going to be the key for Montreal. I think this summer Intertap. I think you nailed it. Right, is at some point I think Ken Hughes is kind of looking to his right. He's looking at the Detroit Red Wings, and then he's looking at Ottawa, which are 2 polar examples, right? So Detroit, like we were just talking about, decided to accelerate things by signing free agents. And then Ottawa, they were just really happy with all the assets they collected, didn't really tinker too much. Like, they added Giroux, but not a lot of like leadership on that team. And we've seen what's happening with that team with not a lot of leadership. So I think it's a mix between both guys, like the successful formula. Like you want to, collect solid assets, but at some point, you have to look at what you have, identify the style and brand of hockey that you're going to want to play. And sometimes if you're picking best player available, that means that you're just collecting an asset and you don't necessarily see that person is going to fit in the brand that you want to play, but you'll be able to flip that with another asset to kind of get the missing piece that you need. And I think
exactly
Montreal is close to being there. Like there's enough assets there's enough putty raw materials to convert into the that they need, and I think they're close to being that. But we'll see.
I look at Ottawa guys, and I think if you have a season where, first of all, like totally misjudge the goaltending, like I don't know what you're doing with, like there's a reason LA moved on from Korpisalo. Your hope is that Sogard eventually makes it, but then we saw that Reinbacher goal against him, and you go, oh, he's still got big holes. Like no offense against Reinbacher, that's a 2-0, but he buries it. You see, that's a 6'7" goalie that does not look 6'7". So you're like, but they're that close. Like they've got Brady Tkachuk. They've got, if Norris could ever get healthy, Pinto plays a full season without getting into gambling debt.
Well, Michael, let me ask you this. Let me ask you this question about the Senators.
Mm-hmm.
So on paper, like you look at them in the middle and you think, okay, that's really solid depth, right? But when you think of it though, is Stützle really a center? And
oh my God, yes.
You think? You think like?
Oh my God, that's a 100-point centerman.
Okay, well, just because you get 100 points doesn't mean you know how to play center.
He knows how to play. That is that's a don't underestimate him. I love like Lucas Raymond, but I think he's the best player of that draft right now.
I'm not saying he's not a good player. He's an amazing player.
I guess,
but if you're building down the middle, like so, 2 out of the 3 centermen that they have, I would argue that Pinto right now is probably their most reliable centerman. Josh Norris is not a very reliable centerman. Remember we were talking about the centermen that usually
right. You're right. So like he's a 30-25 guy.
Yeah. So he's kind of a shoot first center, doesn't really play both sides of the puck, and is injured all the time. And then you got Stützle, the dynamic superstar, but isn't really getting coaching staff maybe not really getting to him. He's not really understanding both sides of the game. Playing times of the game correctly as a center. So to me, that's what I mean by roster construction issues with Ottawa. You have all these great raw assets, but I don't know.
I think though, Mark, the biggest issue in Ottawa is the leadership issue. They just don't have the player that can sort of round these rookies into form. I think there's a ton of talent. You're right about that, Michael.
Crazy.
Yeah, there's talent there, but there isn't anybody to sort of harness it and help them teach them how to win, and that's critical. Like what we're seeing right now is somebody like Kachuk that's going out there and he's trying to do way more than he has to. And he's getting involved in more fights than he needs to be, and he's trying to put the team on his back, but it's not working, and that's where I think they missed the boat. And they're going to have to address.
I don't know. I think they're a lot closer than you think. I think the biggest issue right now is you've got, first of all, Tim Stutzle is a 2002. Jake Sanderson is a 2002. So these are still young guys. They're 22. You got 24, which is Brady. They tried the Tarasenko thing, and he produced offensively. If you boil this down, though, like you can't be winning with goalies that are 888 and 85 save percentage.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Like that's killing them, right? So they need a goalie. They've had I think they've had 14 or 16 goalies since Brady's been there. Like that's an insane number.
It is. But sometimes you see goalies like I'll use like an example like Talbot, right? So he's at Ottawa last year, shits the bed all season, is terrible. Then he goes to LA and plays in an actual defensive system, and he's like top 5 in the league, right? So I know, like obviously, like kind of like save percentage is the go-to, right? When it comes to a metric that you'd be looking at, but sometimes it can be really misleading because it's the quality of scoring chances that they're facing.
That's the problem.
Yeah, so goaltending hasn't been great. Korpisalo, I think anybody who just the eye test that he's not there, but it's psychological too, right? Like if you go 10 games and you're being bombarded with all these quality scoring chances, then it's between the ears, right? At some point as well. So I think Ottawa has tons and tons of resources and tons of assets. They just need. Stamkos is going to piece it together. I have confidence that he'll piece it together. But there's some. Sorry.
Who did you say will piece it together?
I think Stamkos. Like I believe in Stamkos. Like I think.
Oh really?
He's a smart guy. Yeah, I think I think he's taken the time. I think they've taken a patient approach. They wanted to. They didn't really want to move, on getting a general manager and coach this year, but they just had to because with how terrible things went. But overall, you can see that they want to take a patient approach in Ottawa and really assess what was going on there. And I think they're still assessing. Jacques Martin is probably going to file a really thick report at the end of the season to the management team about kind of what he saw when he was down there, and we'll see kind of where they go with it from there.
I think they spent way too much time invested in DJ Smith, and that's delayed the development of the team. Yeah. But the reality is, who would have foreseen that Shane Pinto was out for so much for a ridiculous reason, and he's obviously a very important player to them. So you put him back in.
Injuries like to Norris and Batherson.
Injuries, that's what I'm saying. They've missed a bunch of guys, and you look at just Detroit. You pull one guy out, it falls apart. How do you pull 3? That can really? They're just at that point where they're just not going to be able to absorb it. But they're much closer, I think, than a lot of teams. Like between them and Buffalo, those two teams, if you look at the pieces, they're like 1 or 2 pieces away from turning the corner, and I think that's more than the bottom 3rd or 5th of the league is. If anyone's going to break out, it's those guys. Like to me, they could have. I think we looked at them, we go, man, they're way ahead of Detroit. But they're, to your point, like it's weird. Like the mix doesn't work. It's like Claude Giroux, for whatever reason, just doesn't cut it. He puts up the points, it just doesn't cut it from a leadership point of view. Brady, I think, is going to be there though. Will he be there? Good question. Will he be there?
Yeah. No, guys, I can't underestimate the importance. You can't underestimate the importance of chemistry, right? Like, again, like in most cases in a draft, like, again, like when you're at the draft, and Michael curious your thoughts on this. Like when you're at the draft, you're not constructing your roster. You're picking usually the best assets, especially in the first couple rounds. Maybe later, in later rounds, then you're drafting with need, right? But mostly you're just choosing the best player available, right? According to whatever criteria that you have. So after say 3-4 years of collecting all these assets, it's not going to just magically, all these assets that we've randomly picked that were the best ones all fit together and all play the exact roles that we need on a winning hockey team. It's just not going to work out that way, right? So you're going to have you might end up having 3 of the same kind of guys, that you only need one of those kind of guys. So you're going to have to move 2 of those guys to potentially get the kind of guy that you're missing, right? So I think a lot of these teams don't successfully transition in the rebuild from the asset collection phase to the phase where they're actually constructing the roster and putting it together. Like I think that's where Ottawa went wrong. Like look at the summer, they signed Tarasenko and Kubalik.
Yeah, that's
are those the players?
Them, right? Like the Kubalik DeBrincat thing. DeBrincat wasn't doing crap there. He hasn't done much in Detroit, to be honest with you. Like it's been really Patty. You see that Patty Kane is the real drink there. Like he's the guy that's stirring the drink. He's obviously still a very special player, but you'd have to look at DeBrincat and say that's a pretty big disappointment given how he started. So you kind of understand Ottawa's frustration with him. But I think for me it's like this: if you can get Tim Stützle to stop screwing around with diving, that's a big thing. And it sounds like a stupid thing, but that's a guy that's a 90, 100 point player.
It's leadership.
Right? And he has the ability to and I think Brady's gets it because he comes from that DNA, but he's not going to put up with this much longer. I think it's like you guys got to piece this together. So on paper, it should be a lot better than it is. And I'm not sure Jacques Martin's the guy to do that. I mean,
no, like he's there just being data, right? Like to try to stabilize a little bit, plant some seeds and collect data. But when it comes to, I think, again, there's something a little bit more fundamental there. Again, superstar, elite player, right? But I think there's still a lot of work for him there. Like it's not just about diving, Michael. I don't think it's turning over pucks, at critical parts of the game, being able to read the game, like the time of the game, when to take chances.
Lack of maturity.
Well, I think that's what it all boils down to, right? Like, why are you diving? Why are you trying? Like, he's the guy that trusts his talent a lot, but sometimes that's a problem, right? So he's like, he's everything to him is a battle. It's like I have the puck and I can go through with the guys. And I think that to your point, that's it. It's the maturity thing, right?
Yeah.
All that boils down to, okay, settle into your game. He's already accomplished so much with those deficiencies, like other guys that would have ruined their career. And he's got effort.
And is he coachable, right? Like, again, we're hearing some reports. Yeah. Like, so the thing that we've learned the most and the thing that we've learned to love about Slafkovsky, with the reporting that we're hearing, he's an absolute sponge, right? Like he is super, super coachable. And the reason that he's been able to take the strides that he has is 100% that. That's why they drafted him over Shane Wright, is because he was really coachable. Slav, yeah. So we don't. I don't have those reports on Tim Stützle. Like, it's not him being coached on how to produce offense. That's already there naturally, right? But is he going to be coachable? Yeah.
I mean, he's got 245 points in 280 games, 90 points last year and 39 goals. Huge drop off this year. I don't know what the difference is. Is it his sophomore slump? Because the lineup doesn't look that much different, except he had Shane Pinto all year.
The difference. Yeah, I've watched a lot of Ottawa this year, and like the difference is he's frustrated there. He's frustrated, right? Because the coaching staff is trying to get him to play a certain way, and he's not always cooperating. He's not always executing, and he wants to play free out there. So I don't think he's gotten there yet in terms of what it's going to be. So I think that's probably what it is.
Yeah. And then you got Ridley Gregg in there, and like you start going down, you're like, oh, I like that guy. I like Bernard Docker. I like Batherson, there's lots of
that's why it doesn't a lot of good pieces. It's just the blending of them and getting that experience in there. I think that's the critical thing. And yeah,
I blame Trudeau.
next coach. Next coach.
The next question said, should the Habs maybe try to shoot on or give a shot on Jordan Dumais?
Interesting. Small guy, like really, really talented. Like I don't know why Columbus. So he's with Columbus right now, Columbus system, right?
I like they were like, oh, he had a great camp and everything. He was terrible in Team Canada, in my opinion. Like he's going to be a perimeter player. You put these guys in that environment and you start seeing what they really are. That's why guys like, Byfield never played more than third line center, and they were stretching to put him in there. They were like, okay, we'll deal with it because we know he's talented. Like you look at Shane Wright's deficiencies were exposed very early in his Team Canada journey. Like, why is he cut? Well, there's a reason he's cut. He's not as good as you guys think he is. I don't know. To me, Jordan Dumais, I just don't know again, you think of whose job is that guy going to steal?
And he's, again, for Montreal, clearly, like he's just an undersized guy. Like just not like we have Machar, we've got Farrell, so many guys that fit that profile. So just not somebody that I think Hughes would be looking to add to their mix at this point.
Yeah, they need some size up front.
Yeah.
Someone said, why is Shane Wright so bad?
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. We're just, if you mind, you have 5 more minutes, if you don't mind. I want to finish with your top 5 NHL Draft 2024, Michael.
It's going to be horrible. I don't know.
No pressure.
We're recording. This is on the internet forever, too.
What? So. Celebrini? Are you sure?
That's the only. But this is going to be what you saw in Team Canada, guys. Like it's Macklin and everybody else, and as good as Mac is, the other guys have all got problems, right? So it could be a crapshoot of basically 2 through 10. Like any of those guys, like the fact that Cole Eiserman has dropped so far in most people's eyes tells you everything you need to know about this draft, because he could also go second still. Like Cole, what's changed about Cole? Nothing. He scores a bucket of goals, and that's what he's always done. Maybe you don't like his skating and the rest of his game, and it's like, well, what's new? That's what he always was. The defensemen are all kind of imperfect. Like the fact that Silyev is being talked about as a number 2 to me blows my mind. Like I'm confused at this. I get he skates great and he's 6'7". They're like, oh, but his offense fell off. They're like dismissing that. Meanwhile, who are the best defensemen in the league? Like they're all big time offensive producers. It's just weird. If you go through every one of basically 2 through 10 or 11, there's problems with all of them.
Yeah, like usually how there's like in the draft, right? So after like how usually there's tiers. I think in this draft, so you got Celebrini, and then usually there's like this second tier where there's like maybe 2 or 3 players. But I think that second tier is like 10 players. It's like Celebrini and then like 10 guys.
That's what I'm saying too. I agree with you. Like so, you look at last
tier 1 and then the rest.
We had Fantilli, we had Carlson.
Yeah.
Like, and you go down, and you're right. There is Bedard. Like, you could say what you want.
Yeah.
I've watched Adam and Connor since they were, 13, 14. I'm like, this is not the same animal. Right. And Leo Carlson, I thought, and then you have all these overagers last year, right? So you could tell the top 5 picks are all going to be impact players. Like you'll have a Will Smith. I don't see that this year. I just don't. I think there's good players and there's depth. But, could you project what Zane Parek's going to be? Like, I have no idea.
You might see it more so on the defensive end than you will with the forwards. I think the forwards are a little bit harder to project, to be honest with you. There's a lot of good – I think there's a lot of good right-handed defensemen that are in there this year that I think teams will jump at and will probably – I'd say in the top 10, maybe at least half of them will be defensemen.
So, well, we know that, yeah, you're right. So, like, obviously, Silyev is being talked about anywhere from 2 to 6, right? 2 to 7. Levusha is kind of similar, right? He's a right shot defenseman. Dickinson in London. And then you've got Parekh. So you're like, and then I've watched Zeev bully him a lot, and Zeev's like, I don't know, I like Zeev, but Zeev was like the number 4 defenseman at Shattuck.
Yeah, he's more of like a two-way guy. Like he doesn't have that high-end offense, right?
Exactly. Like I don't project him as a top 2, and it might take him a while. He might be an Oliver Shillington type defenseman.
Yeah.
So it's like, and that's the problem with all these guys. So not that I don't want to commit, but I'm like looking at it and I go, I don't see an obvious 2 through 11.
Yeah, it's like I said, I think that that second tier is much, much wider than it usually would be. There's not that second tier of like 4 or 5 guys. It's really a pick 'em, depending on, and like we were talking about, Michael, I don't know if you agree, but this is the time of the year where you're going to see risers come up too, right? Because you're going to have the under 18, and then once the CHL is done, a lot of the scouts then kind of focus to watching tape of European prospects. So that's when you start to see maybe some European prospects that were a little underviewed, right? That might kind of be late risers too, right? So it's a weird time for yeah, it's a weird limbo right now. But I think it's a win for forwards this year, especially like and Montreal. It's just, again, they've been like, I'm not going to complain because Detroit's definitely been super unlucky with the draft as well, but Montreal has been as well.
You think it's more a year for the forwards?
No, I'm saying it's just bad luck for the Habs because they really need a forward, and it's just another.
I see.
Yeah, so I was going to complain, but then I remembered that I'm talking to a Detroit Red Wings fan, and like he was saying, like they finished last overall and didn't win the lottery, and so Detroit's been pretty unlucky with the draft too. So,
well, we got Lucas Raymond, so I think we finished pretty lucky. It turned out we probably got the best guy next to Stützle, and he's more mature than Stützle. So that's why I'm curious. Although Quinton Byfield's starting to play catch up pretty fast.
Yeah. Well, I think if you had to,
guys, I don't know. Like, how do you guys project it? Like, do you think there's a lock at 2 or 3?
No, there's probably. I mean, you can make a case for Demidov being at number 2, just based on the skill level that you see. But then you have that whole intangible about when will he be able to, come to North America and be ready at that point.
MHL though, in tap. He's playing MHL, so he doesn't get stuck in the KHL.
Yeah.
So
he's probably going to be there at least 3 years.
No, I don't think so. I think that he's going to get out a lot sooner because the problem with Michkov is like literal mobsters are his agent, and like his pops, that thing was really suspicious, and he signed in the KHL young, and I think that Demidov is very conscious of that. So if it's like if he doesn't go to the CHL next year or something, which I don't think will happen, but you never know. I don't know. Will he sign the KHL? Like someone might draft him and bring him over.
I think if you poll Habs fans, Michael, like I think the overwhelming majority are hoping that Montreal will draft Lindstrom. I think he's probably the guy that has the safest, floor, for in that range, because I think regardless, he's going to give you the size, the skating, positional flexibility. Looks like he can score. Maybe doesn't end up being, have the playmaking that you want for a top 2 center in the NHL. But I think the Habs fans are starving for that, just that big body forward, right? And I would be shocked if Lidstrom makes it out of the top 5 guys, just because when do 6'3" plus centers, that are labeled as centers, make it out of the top 5? There's just not many of those guys in this year's draft, right? Catton, I think, to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if he's this year's Benson and maybe even slides out of the top 10 miraculously.
Yep, the damn team.
That. Yeah. But again, comparing Benson to Catton, for me, he's a very different player. Like, I still take Benson on my team every day over Catton because Benson has a propensity to go in the harder areas and win puck battles, way, way more than Catton. You could maybe argue that Catton has a better shot than Benson did, but
His
overall,
numbers are impressive, though. Kane, though.
oh, the numbers are
His numbers
impressive.
are impressive. Yeah,
Yeah,
you can't argue with
but
that.
no, but in terms of, compete level and motor, I think, if Benson goes, where did he go? 12, 11 last year to Buffalo?
13th or
Yeah,
11th.
yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised if Catton
Yeah,
goes somewhere around. So I think it's going to be Celebrini, Lindstrom's going to be in there, and then pick like depending who finishes in order. Like I think most of those teams are going to be taking defensemen in whatever order, depending on how they evaluate them. It's hard to tell.
Well, and that's the key. You're gonna really have to look at the teams that are going to be below Montreal and sort of anticipate what they're going to be going for. And in a couple cases, like I would say Anaheim, I would be shocked if they went defenseman. I think that they'll probably go forward as well because I think they're stacked there. But I think San Jose will definitely go defense. Chicago will probably, well, if they end up getting number one, you'll have Celebrini, obviously. But who else is? I mean, you look at the forwards, and what do you have? What do you have? Like some people make good cases for Ginla as well, but will he be in the top 10?
I was going to say Teej might be the dark horse, right? Like Teej has got something.
Yeah, but
like
I don't think
Yzerman is always a possibility.
But is he in that secondary tier, Michael? Like we talked about. So you got Celebrini, you've got maybe Lidstrom and Catton, and then all those D in that secondary tier. Question is, does Ginla get in that secondary tier, or does he come out just outside the top 10?
But I can't. I think that's like where someone would really have to reach to do it, but it wouldn't be out of the question because there's just deficiencies, like I said, in all these guys. So I think the D will all play. The question is what they end up being. Like, is there a true number one in there? The guy that's really intriguing is Perrick. He could have real high offense, but he could be also a nightmare, right? And that's kind of, he might have some challenges that way. He might be like the new Shane Ghost-Bear or something like that, right? With a better shot, maybe. But
I think Michael,
I think sorry, I was going to say, I think also Levchinov will be a good one as well. I think he might go in the top 5 or 6.
I think they're going to be good. Like, I think there's like, all the defensemen there are not bad. It's just no one's a number one. I don't think that's a guarantee. It would be a shock if any one of them became a number one to me.
So, guys, I got to jump off here in a minute, but I'd be pissed if I didn't ask Mike because we've been talking a lot about Yzerman over the last couple of days in the chat, right? So, we'd love to hear your take. Like, I'll give you my take on kind of what I've been seeing with Yzerman, and let me know what you think is. The thing with Yzerman is like he's a pure goal scorer, right? But the knock on him, the knock on him is he going to be able to produce offense at the NHL level in the sense, well, can he create his own shots and will he get himself where he needs to go to get that shot away? I.e., is he going to be a Wallstrom or Holtz kind of guy, or is he really going to be somebody that's going to produce at the NHL level based on what you know about him?
I think low end, he's a top 6 Toffoli type guy. Like, people complain about Holtz, but here's a guy who's got 16 or 18 goals, right? So he's definitely not a complete player. And that's probably why people are kind of looking at him that way, right? So I think, we saw this before with Kyle Connor, who dropped, and that's kind of the way people were looking at Kyle Connor. But he's become a very good NHL player. I don't, he could be a real important piece, and you need guys like that to score. I just, to your point, is this really a top 3 guy? I don't know about that. I mean, maybe on an imperfect team. I just don't think he's a good skater. He's a great shot. He's got, goal hunger, and that's what you're getting.
Yeah. Yeah. And at the NHL, like again, like to me, like playing hockey is not like if there was like we always use Mike Hoffman as an affectionate example of that, right? if there was a sport called goal scoring, Mike Hoffman would be awesome at that sport, right? At shooting, like this is a pure shooter.
Yep.
But that's not what hockey is. Like you have to be able to do give and goes with your teammates. You have to fit within team concepts to be in the right place to create offense. And that's kind of the knock on Eisner, right? Is
totally
it's it's oversimplified
is it
to say that
that's coachable?
Well, that's
is it something that's coachable?
I don't know.
I mean,
I don't know.
I mean, the same argument could have been made a while back about Cole Caulfield as well, right? Came in as pure goal scorer, but he's really rounded his game now, and I think that's because you have some good coaching that's have steered him that direction.
But that's the difference, right? You look at Caulfield's numbers back then, guys, and yes, it is similar, but he did create. Like I know he had that crazy team with Zegras and all those guys, but he did create a lot more own shots than Yzerman does back then, right? So that's why I'm saying the comparison isn't perfect because Caulfield did create more of his own chances than Yzerman does now. That's what the analytics bear out.
So he played on. I just remember, the last time I really spent time watching him was when he was at Shattuck. So it's been a while. And that was a team with like Macklin and had Aiden Park and a bunch of those guys, right? That was just a stupid. They're always stacked, but that's kind of it. And he was definitely like, he was the trigger man and Macklin was the setup man then. And he played a little bit with Aiden, but that was really the line. So I think that's what you're looking for is like, okay, if you have like a playmaking centerman, he could really finish. But I think to your point, like the risk is he becomes a Mike Hoffman. He could be a Tyler Toffoli, where it's like you don't love the rest of his game, but then you realize, man, he's really valuable, right? Like it depends what your expectation is. And that's maybe why he's falling. Because if you can get him, or again, I'll use the Kyle Connor example, like you're like, wow, we love this guy, he really scores, but he's never really truly that number one guy, right?
Yeah. Or is he more like a Kaliev? Kaliev fell to that second round, right? But elite finisher, right?
Yeah, Kaliev was an asshole. Kaliev was Kaliev was telling the coach he didn't want to practice in the OHL. Even the Russian agents were like, yeah, this guy's a nightmare.
Really? Yeah.
Practice.
Yeah.
Practice.
He
We're talking about practice.
He was like, I don't want to practice. Why do I want to practice? Wow. Like, what are you talking about?
Wow.
He was a problem. So it's funny for me to like when he made LA, I'm like, wow, that LA's got like a real strong culture for them to whip him into shape because it wasn't about talent or anything. It was just like he was like really difficult person, like really difficult.
Interesting.
I'm going to finish this way, guys, if you don't mind. We passed the time, but I just want to remind you, because we have Montreal Canadiens fans, we have Detroit Red Wings fans. So the time you talked, I was very more quiet today, but I was doing other things, and I went back to 2018 NHL Draft. The draft, some people say it's not a big deal, you think that, but if you make a mistake and you miss the players, imagine if you have this one now. Montreal, Vernon Tkachuk. Not bad?
Mm-hmm.
Detroit Red Wings. Quinn Hughes.
Zadina. We picked Zadina.
Can you imagine that? And I can go like this. Arizona pick Ayton. They could get Quinn Hughes. But worst case, guys, the New York Rangers could have Evan Bouchard today compared to him. So, and that draft, guys, the 2018, they don't have a lot of great players on the first round. You have to go second round, and the best players is Romanov with the best player. They have the more game, and you have Sean Dorsey on that and Kevin Baugh. But it's just give you an idea, guys. Whenever you pick top 10, you cannot miss a mistake. You cannot.
Well, that was such a weird. So I think, Coach, and you might agree with me, there's a lot of Jedi mind tricks that go on sometimes, right? Like the Yakupov year was one of those where I think as scouts, we were all saying Philip Forsberg should be first overall, and he dropped so far. But everybody was messing with Edmonton because they kept getting first overall picks. And like we knew Galchenyuk played, I think, 4 games all year because he was hurt. but we knew all the crazy off-ice stuff with his dad. And then Yakupov, I was watching him in the Subway Series, and I was like, does he know how to play hockey? The better player was this other big, tall guy that ended up being Val Nichushkin. And I was like, well, that guy's better than him. And Val went, later in the draft. So I think that was the case of, and then Ryan Murray was a silver tip, but Ryan Murray, you felt had a very, I don't know, he was a good skater, but the rest of his game, you weren't, I don't know. I felt like everybody was messing with those teams. Mainly it was Edmonton. Everyone was pissed off at Edmonton. So they were talking up all these other guys as the best guys, and scouts, try not to talk to each other, but it happens, right? And I think that there's years like that. And I think that year with, Kotkaniemi and Barrett Hayton and Zadina, we were all shocked Zadina fell, and I thought they were going to get a really good player. But I think there was one of those years where the talent was not obvious. And I think teams were messing with everyone because there were guys that
8 players on the top first round, right? The 31 overall, all the way, only played 60 games and less. 8 of them only played 60 games and less. And what they have in common, Marco, Jay O'Brien, Philip Owenson, and Dominic Buck. What they have in common?
What do they all have in common?
Jay O'Brien, Philip Owenson, and Dominic Buck.
They never played, or
like I don't recognize their names.
So if you don't recognize your name, what it would tell you by this?
They probably never played in the NHL.
They never played.
They never played in the NHL.
Yeah, it was such a weird draft that year. So imagine, to your point, like I just remember like thinking, and I know we had these arguments. I was like, why would you ever pass on Brady Tkachuk? And I was like, well, he's not a centerman. That's what everybody kept saying. And I was like, well, the best centerman's this Kotkaniemi guy. But really, he was rated like 23rd. He was like rated 45th, 23rd, and he kept moving up. And I feel like they were just fucking with people. I feel it was like, if you listen to the chatter, the last minute chatter, and I feel like that happened last year with like the Russian defenseman that, they passed on Mishkov and all the talk at the draft was this Russian defenseman that was interviewing with people like, God, he gave a great interview. I'm like, all right. He was ranked 47th, and then he went like 4th or what do you go 5th or 6th? And we're like, what? And I remember I know his agent. So like I talked to his agent, he goes, I was shocked.
Wow. Here we go, guys. We overtime, and we're like on the fly like NHL Network tonight. What a great night! If you don't enjoy it, I don't know. We need to bring more because we deliver a great continence hockey tonight because we have a great co-host, Michael Devellano, and off tap, and Marco Labi. Thanks so much to be with us tonight. The moderator Run with Kings was in the house tonight. Ozzy Calabro with all the news. All the people click on the likes. And then all the people have a question. We hope we answer to all of you. Unfortunately, we cannot do all of your questions. Sometimes the time moves quicker, faster, what we expect, and we try to bring the best we can. It's not easy to manage the chat, the people, and the conversation all at the same time, but we did it. Over 2 hours tonight. Thanks so much, everybody, to be a part of the show. Hopefully, see you again, Michael Devellano, very soon to be a part of the show. I will let you go all the way, guys. I will finish the out of this video live stream, guys. So thank you so much, Marco and Artap and Michael Devellano. Hopefully, see you very soon, all the 3 guys. Have an amazing, great night. I look forward to see you next time
on Twitter.
Come back again soon, Michael. It was a lot of fun, man.
Yeah, I'll come back next week if you want.
It's great being with you guys. All right, good night, everyone.
All of you. Thanks so much. Appreciate that. Here we go, guys. Before we leave, we want to remind each one of you guys, you are awesome. You are amazing. You are the best. And remember, you have greatness inside of you. What a great show of hockey, guys. Tonight was a place to be on the Monday night, March 25th, 2024. Hopefully you enjoyed the show tonight. Again, we want to thank all the moderators to be with us tonight and also the co-hosts. Hopefully see all of them again very soon. Don't forget tomorrow night, the Montreal Canadiens play again the Colorado Avalanche, 9 o'clock p.m. Going to be live to do a play-by-play And hopefully you're going to join us Wednesday night for another hockey Habs locker room report at 9 o'clock p.m. It was a pleasure to entertain you for over 2 hours tonight. Until then, my friend, be well, be healthy. Find a way not only dominate your day, but find a way to dominate the first half of what? Look, la person. Your 2024. And it is a great night, everybody. Sweet dream. I look forward to until the next time. Hockey Nation, I show the Habs Nation want to tell you one thing. We love you, people. An amazing great night, everybody. See you next time. Good night for you. Luc Person. Arje Calabro. It's coming very soon. Booyah!